You told me to slam it. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Polk County School Board's work session. We will now call the work session for January 27th, 2026 to order. Thank you to our staff who are available and accessible to help address any questions. As a board, we strive to work with you to ensure that we achieve our mission to provide a high-quality education for all students. I would like to start by reading our Who Are We statement. We are the Polk County Leadership Governance Team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are operating with integrity, respecting our students, staff, families, and each other, establishing a culture where stakeholders feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth, and supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. Collectively, we need to work on behalf of the children we serve and find avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There is no acceptable alternative. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff member. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. We hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create a community of lifelong learners. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Superintendent Hyde to lead us in our work session today.
Good morning or good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, members of staff and community. Thank you for being here today. We have several items on today's superintendent's report and a handful of items under new business for the board to have further discussion on. At this time, we will begin with our internal funds audit discussion. I'd like to invite Ms. Carol Matthews and Lauren Hinton to the microphone to share those outcomes.
We are joined today by Jennifer Christensen with Carr-Ridge Ingram to present the results of the internal funds audit. Many of you know Jennifer and her firm have conducted this audit for our district for more than a decade, and we appreciate the continuity and expertise that they bring. I'm pleased to report that this year's audit results are encouraging overall, with trends indicating a decrease in findings across our schools. I want to acknowledge the outstanding work of our accounting team, Lauren Hinton and Earl Morse, for their comprehensive revision of the internal accounts manual. This was a major undertaking, and their efforts addressed an area that had previously been noted as a deficiency in past audits. So at this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Christensen to walk us through the audit report.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Will my presentation appear on the screen to go through?
There.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
And, oh, sorry. I guess I have to, okay, thank you. So I'm just going to go over briefly the financial statements for the internal funds, and then go over the audit process that we went through, and then some of the details on what we call the school level recommendations that we have, and then our district-wide recommendations. So looking at the financial statements, and again, to just kind of remind everybody, the internal funds, that is one fund of the district that includes the student activity accounts. And so those are your prom tickets, football tickets, your fundraisers. And so this is money that's raised by the students and within each school. And so if you look at the financial statements, you'll see the total assets were about $15.8 million. And that's made up of primarily $15 million of that is cash and investments. And then we have a little bit of inventory. Schools may have uniforms or school stores. And then we had liabilities of about $759,000. half of that is amounts that are just owed to vendors, and then the other half are just amounts owed to other funds, and that's just due to the transfers in between the internal fund and the other district's funds. And so you can see the total additions would be similar to what like total revenue for the funds, and that was $15.7 million for the year, and then the deductions or the expenditures were $14 million. So you can see compared to the prior year, it is growing, and that is a trend we normally see in internal funds. We just want to make sure that the district and everyone keeps an eye on these funds. We want to raise the money that's raised. We want to spend it in the same year because the state law says that the students that raise it, the money should benefit them. So that's something just to keep an eye on. 15 million may seem like a large number, but you have to keep in mind that you have to split that up among every school. Every school has a different amount in the district, and then within each school, every club has an account, every sports team has an account. So then it starts to get a little smaller by account, but we do want the schools to encourage them to spend the money in the year that they raise it. For our audit report, we had an unmodified report, so that's a clean audit opinion. We did have two adjustments. They're actually related to each other, so it's almost like one adjustment. We just separated them out, and it's just to record the allowance for doubtful accounts. That's something that each year we record that based off of the numbers and the estimates that the district gives us. So it's really more of like a district proposed adjustment. And so the amount of receivables did go down this year for the career centers. We, in the past, they were starting to build a little bit, but they did go down this year. And then we had two what we call past adjustments. These are items that we came across during the audit that are small, immaterial in nature, so we don't actually post them. The financial statements do not reflect these adjustments, but we do have to accumulate them and provide them to the district at the end of the audit to make sure they agree that they're immaterial. And it was just the inventory. Schools normally will inventory their yearbooks, but we look at yearbooks from prior years of having little to no market value. So we normally write them down because very seldom are yearbooks sold. It happens sometimes, but it's usually maybe, a couple of yearbooks. So that's why we record an adjustment to reduce those. And then as far as sensitive footnotes, in the internal funds, we really didn't have any footnotes that are highly sensitive, but we do note in there the investments. If there were any concentrations in one type of investment, we would have to disclose that, and we didn't have any such concentrations this year. Next, with the audit process, a couple of things that we're required to communicate with you if we come across them. If we had any disagreements with management, which we did not have any significant difficulties, again, we didn't have any. If we were aware of the district consulting with outside accountants on any type of technical issue, we would need to bring that to your attention, but we're not aware of any type of consultations. And then if we came across any fraud or illegal acts during our processes, and we did not come across any of those during our audit. So, good news, nothing to report on that front on any of those. Our internal funds audit consists of, we do an audit of the financial statements, so we're testing all the numbers in the financial statements, but then a larger part of our audit is doing compliance testing, and that really does take a full team effort with a lot of different departments at the school district. So I always like to kind of put this in to give a little bit of acknowledgement for, we work with Carol and her internal audit team. We work with Lauren and Earl with the accounting team, and in fact, we come out here to do the compliance testing part. We do it on site, and we pretty much ask for a million things while we're here, and they always provide the information. They provide it pretty timely, so we do appreciate that. We also reach out to the schools several times during the audits. At the beginning, during the summer, we reach out and we ask for certain information. We do our compliance testing, and then we have a report of what we call school findings that we then have an exit conference with every financial secretary and principal where we go over the report with them, go over the findings, and then if they have any additional information they want to provide to us or if there's anything maybe that we weren't aware of with the information we had, they'll bring it to our attention at that point, and then they provide us with responses for all of those school level findings for us to add in our report. So we also appreciate the work that they do, and if you can imagine, we're reaching out to schools in some departments, so we may have about 130 that we're reaching out to. They all provide us with the information we need. A few we might have to follow up with, but on the large scale, they've all are very responsive to our requests, so we do appreciate that. I mentioned before, we do the compliance testing. We do compliance testing on 100% of the schools and departments. Anyone who had activity in their internal fund for the year, we do testing. And so you could see listed there some of the different areas that we test on. And again, we test all of these areas for every school each year. So I think that's really a good thing to have that consistency among all schools so that they know that every year they are going to be audited, their internal funds. So now, as Carol had mentioned earlier, you could see the trend here of the average findings per school. And normally, I can see a trend among all my school districts. And so, of course, when COVID hit, all the findings went down because all the activity went down. And then we saw a slow rise, and you could see that over the last few years on yours. But this year, I have not been able to find a trend among my school districts. I have some school districts where their findings continue to increase, and then I have like Polk County schools where their average findings decreased. And so at this point, I think everything has kind of normalized from COVID, and we've been back to full activity for a couple years. So any instance, it's going to appear as a finding. So you can see here, we have about 83% of schools that had two or less findings. And last year, that was about 81%. So there was an increase in the number of schools that had less findings. And then last year, 5 or more, I wrote it down, 5 or more, we had 4 this year, 4 schools. And last year, I believe it was 7. Actually, it was 12. We had 12 findings, 12 schools last year that had 5 or more findings. So you could see that is a huge decrease this year. Here are some of the more common findings we had, or the 5 most common. So I just wanted to kind of show, for the first one, they were fundraiser reports that either weren't submitted at all or they just weren't submitted timely. And there were 22 instances. Last year, there were 33. The next one has to do with disbursements not being approved ahead of time. We had 20 this year. We had 27 last year. So I have some subsequent slides that are going to show the trends on the more common findings over the last 3 years. But I just wanted to show you the fundraising activity forms not approved timely. We had 17 last year, 16 this year. So you could see there are findings that are definitely going down, those more common findings. So it, I think, really pays off to focus on some of those and make sure that, again, communicating with the schools what the different policies and procedures are. I'm not going to go through each of these, but I just wanted to show you like a graphical representation of some of the common findings we had. And you can see the bar on the bottom, the dark blue is 2 years ago, the light blue is last year, and then the orange is this year. So you can see that a lot of these findings have gone down over the years. And I kind of already went through some of these numbers. Some of these findings, I think I look at, there's going to be processes and procedures where there are forms that need to be completed. They need to be completed by a certain time frame, and maybe they're late. And so you have those findings that are more procedural, and there are reasons for those rules. But when I compare it to rules like disbursements not being approved ahead of time, to me, those are the ones that are maybe a little more risky than a form being turned in a week late. And so the second one on here, the disbursement's not approved prior to the good or service being purchased. So basically, something's being ordered at a school, but the principal, or at least there was not written evidence that the principal approved it ahead of time. And so that's one that we'll see later. We did classify that as a deficiency because there were 20 schools that had that comment. And so we just recommend that that training be reiterated to the schools that, sometimes the schools may say, oh, well, no, I was verbally told that I can purchase it. But, the auditors always like to see everything in writing, even if it's an email or anything to show that it had been approved ahead of time. So that's one that we did include as a deficiency. This slide is just to show the findings that had the largest reduction from the year before. I do think as auditors, we always report, which is what we need to do. We report everything that we see that wasn't done, according to process procedures. But there's also another side of it of all the improvements we see. And so I like to always point that out too, to see that, we do have a lot of findings where the numbers have gone down quite a bit. And I'll mention later on in my presentation one of the findings that decreased the most. And so here I already mentioned the deficiency that we reported was that we had the 20 instances of the purchases being made prior to it being approved by the principal. But we did not have any material weaknesses in internal control that we were required to communicate. So nothing. It's when we have internal control findings that we have to report, the most severe would be a material weakness, then we have a significant deficiency, and then the bottom is a deficiency that isn't required to be written in our report. It's more of a, this is something we came across that we thought maybe you want to kind of keep an eye on. Improvement points are then just items we came across that we said, hey, we have some recommendations here. They're not necessarily deficiencies or findings, but it's something we think it's important to look at. And so we did have an improvement point for on the IT side to complete a disaster recovery test annually, and their response is that they're working on getting a new test done, getting it online, and so they are in the process of working on that. And then the comment that we had last year, we had a deficiency about deficit balances. So we had 68 different accounts. So that could be a football account at one school, it could be a third grade account at another school, and 68 of them had negative balances at the end of the year. So I know this is something that the accounting department was all over, and they said, we are going to monitor this throughout the year. We are going to reach out to schools to make sure they don't overspend any accounts. And this year we had 5. Which is probably the least amount that I've ever seen, within the 10 years that we've audited Polk. So that is nice as an auditor to see that when we talk to the district that they respond and that you can see the difference in the findings. So again, I think that's great. I think this has been a very good audit this year. And are there any questions or comments or anything? Yes.
Board members, I'm going to jump in real quick before I start responding to those of you who have asked a question or make a comment. So on the second to last slide or third to last slide, when we talk about the no material weaknesses were noted, I want to go ahead and outline for you procedurally what we're doing, and I need to provide an explanation as far as the improvement point. In particular, the goods or services being ordered prior to the principal's approval. So now we have taken additional steps. We have a very thorough approval process, but what we have found is sometimes our vendors are just assuming that because they're in the process of trying to get a purchase order or go through the process for approval, they're shipping items before the approval is made. We are now instituting a process where all of our vendors will receive an annual notice to tell them that that is not a practice we will tolerate, and that should that continue, we will discontinue partnering with them. Because it does create a potential exposure, and ultimately, if they ship a product and then we deny that purchase for obvious reasons, potentially for any number of reasons, we don't want to be on the hook for those products and having to ship them back. The second one is the disaster recovery failover test. So I did ask the IT department, because this is the second year that we had that recommendation or that improvement point identified. So this year in particular, it's due to the SAP rollover. That the problem is if they were to do a failover test, it would adversely impact our data. And so they wanted to protect that. I have a full explanation. I will forward that to the board so that you see all the points that IT identified as to why. And so that was an intentional decision on our part and arguably a good one. However, we will make sure we're in compliance with that every year moving forward. And again, kudos to Ms. Matthews and Lauren Hinton and a team on reducing the overall number of deficit balances. But of the 5 largest areas, 4 of those are all related to fundraising or special activities. And so it's clear that we need to do some additional training. The benefit is, as they pointed out, I don't know how many of you caught it, they looked at everyone. So we know exactly which schools had these findings. So I don't have to put out a memo or retrain the entirety of the district. I can actually target those individual schools and the staff involved so we can make sure that they're familiar with all the processes. And then prior to making them attend additional training, we will look specifically at the example that was shared, which is, was it that it wasn't completed, or was it that it was done beyond the deadline? Deadlines are something we can address very quickly with staff and our administrators, but I want to make sure that we're differentiating between a deadline issue or a procedural error. And I guess you could argue that both are procedural errors. However, one I feel is far more impactful or has a greater potential for adverse impact on the district than the other. So, Mr. Sharpless.
I first just want to say that it's very important that we do these internal funds audits. I think it's important for our taxpayers to know and our community to know whenever they give a donation to our schools that it's properly being handled. So want to thank you for doing this audit of our audit and what you do. I first just want to make a comment, then I have a question, and I'm not sure if this question is to Superintendent Hyde, Ms. Matthews, or you. Y'all can figure it out when I ask it. First, I just want to make the comment that it really, as a board member, as a board chair, it makes me happy to notice that we're making corrections based on these previous reports. When you see how much that the deficit balance have decreased because of that, that's huge, right? And so I think that's something to be applauded. My question is about 2 different ones. The first one is about, let's see here. When the reports aren't submitted on a timely manner, whether that's the annual reports, the specific fundraising reports, and I'm talking specifically from the outside organizations, like the PTAs, like the booster clubs, whatever. What kind of enforcement mechanism do we have to require them to submit them on time? And again, I don't know, like if they're habitual offenders, like how do we deal with that?
Ms. Matthews owns half of it, I own the other half.
Okay. I have one other question after that, so.
It's challenging, because we are dealing with outside organizations. We hold the principal responsible for collecting those, and she's the one that would get the finding or he would get the finding in the audit report, but she's working with volunteers, and those people, a lot of times, you'll have a board of directors, and then their kids graduate, they move on, didn't turn in the annual financial report, and then it's really challenging to get that. We do have a deadline of August 1st, and it's to be submitted to my office, and so we track all those on a spreadsheet that we've received and ones we're expecting, and we send out reminders. Please get this in, please get this in. And so we do pretty good. I think that number was not, astronomical or anything. Yeah, I don't know beyond that. It's the reminder, and the finding,
Okay.
We involve the regional so that they can also, talk with the schools and kind of stay on them to get them. But it's really the onus, I think, of the outside organizations. I think our schools definitely don't want a finding, and they work to get those in, but because of those reasons that I mentioned, it can be challenging sometimes. And this time, we had a couple that had ceased to be in existence. They went inactive, but sometimes they don't think that, I've got to do closeout records. So I need to close the bank account. I need to transfer that money to the school that it was supporting. And I need to file that paperwork to show that I did that. And so sometimes it's a case like that. We had two where there is a finding, and then we, as an internal audit department, followed up even after Jennifer and her team, and after the audit was done, we followed up and just said, hey, you can't leave this just hanging. And then they were able to provide us with those closing documents, and so we were able to mark them off our spreadsheet so we're not bugging them next year for them.
So the second part of that is obviously on my side of the house, which is the accountability piece. And so, as Ms. Matthews points out, parent or volunteer organizations and PTO and PTA are largely excluded from us anyways, because they audit independently, if I recall correctly. The consequences or the accountability on our side really is holding the school leadership and school staff responsible. As Ms. Matthews, I think that's actually a great example. If you have a club or an organization or something that basically closes, they do have to close out their balances. But that should not solely be a responsibility on our finance and auditing team to catch that. The school knows that that's no longer functioning. They then have some responsibility to communicate that. So, and then ultimately, and I think this is the question you were getting at, which is if we have repeated offenses on behalf of a booster, it will go away. We have the ability to say we're simply not going to support this any longer, and either the school will have to assume that responsibility or task, or we're going to require that booster club to completely restructure and retrain, because we can't simply keep exposing the district or the school to those issues.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My other question, I noticed when we looked at the big pie chart, right, slide, most of our schools only have very few findings, if any, but there's 4 of them that had 5 or more, right? So there's only a handful of them that are, may need some additional training. I was wondering, and you said those are targeted now because we know which ones those are, Superintendent Hyde. Are we going to follow up with additional training for those schools? How does that work?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we'll look at each instance of why they had a finding in particular, because the school that had one finding, again, if it's a timeline issue, that's different than a noncompliance with procedural expectations. So we'll define those, triage those, tier them accordingly, and address those to go through. But yes, we will target every school on that list to define or determine to what extent there's retraining required, cross-training required. And some of these may occur simply because of illness, because of the timeline in which something was submitted, and then we go on a break for a holiday. I mean, there's a lot of things that can come into play. So again, I don't want to simply say that we're going to be punitive and responsive to this without having first gone through and make sure we work with Carol and her team to identify which schools most need support or retraining on this topic.
Excellent, thank you. And
Sometimes that will trigger an internal audit when we follow up with the findings, and if we see there were 500 missing tickets or cash, we'll follow up with that school and do our own detailed audit, maybe go out to the school or whatever it takes. So that's another way that we follow up.
Okay. Excellent. So the point is, community, you're listening right now, understand that we take this very seriously, and we are certainly asking questions. So, but overall, it's a great report. So, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Keys?
I won't be nearly as long. So, as someone who served on the internal audit and finance committee for, Ms. Matthews, was like 6 years, and chair of it for 3 of those, I will tell you that it's stated that a lot of these are third party, outside, and are volunteers, right? So this is constantly a moving target. We're talking about folks that are here today and gone tomorrow. I'll give you a perfect example of that. We're having a discussion in our house that our daughter is in 8th grade, and what is my wife's responsibilities after our child goes to high school and leaves the middle school. So those come up. So it's a constantly moving target, and we do the best we can with it. I think the nature of that is we're always going to find findings, and that leads to my next comment. Just amazed by slide 12, right? Slide 12 was the latest findings in the over year, and the reductions we've seen. That actually, I'm sorry, was the one above roulette you're showing on the screen. Not common findings, but the one largest reduction, that one. So if we look at that, and Mr. Sharpless spoke to especially the one with the deficit account balances, as a banker, I cringe when I see that and notice those reduced to 5. So there is oversight there. We are looking at these schools and these outside parties, but imagine too, on that number we said that we analyzed 147 of those. 147 were touched. That's a bunch of schools. We can't look at all 147 all the time, but we spot check enough to where we're going to see these findings. And I'm rambling now, but again, I think the biggest part was we're seeing a reduction in all these, but we're never going to see it go away totally. So great job at doing those. And probably my last comment on those, and in those individuals that serve in those roles, these third parties, these booster clubs, I would venture to say, and Ms. Matthews, you can comment on that because you speak to these folks, would assume that a lot of them are not financial professionals. They're volunteers that said, hey, we don't have anybody, will you raise your hand? Yeah, I'll do it. We're not actually, we're not seeing a lot of CPAs or, bankers in those positions handling these booster funds. So all in all, I think you guys do a great job. We're seeing those findings go down, right? But I want to those maybe listening in, saying they're never going to constantly go away because it's a moving target. So, Mrs. Christensen, thank you for your presentation. Great job, Ms. Matthews. Thank you for your explanation.
Ms. Fields?
Thank you. I would just say I remember when, and the when is very long, when there were many findings. And I remember when training was put in place to make sure that those findings decreased. And the work is being done. It's being shown. So I want to commend everybody, all of the staff, all of the leaders in the various departments of the urgency that they have seen to correct whatever needed to be corrected, and it's never going to be 100%. We can work towards that, but it's much, much better. So I just wanted to commend you all for that. I think the only question that I have is, are we still having someone to go to the various locations to get deposits? Is that still being done?
Yes, ma'am. We contract with an armored car service, and they go to each school and pick up their funds for deposit.
I just wanted to make sure that it was still being continued. Thank you. Great job.
And Dr. Allen?
All right, thank you, Superintendent. Yeah, I'll continue that conversation as well, and in gratitude as well to our staff for the work on this. Definitely a heavy lift. The 100% testing is a significant element to this report as well. So, Ms. Christensen, thank you for the update here as well. I can reflect back to that recent phone call with you and just those hard questions and that you were asking of us as well. So I think at the beginning, our chair read out our "Who Are We" statement, and the number one item is operating with integrity. So that's our goal, and this is a part of that process. So thank you for that external oversight and lens into what we're doing here. I think transitioning to two questions. One, Superintendent alluded to it. Chair Sharpless was hitting it a little bit as well, and that would be my second question to Ms. Matthews. But first of all, I appreciate the noting of the trends, right? And comparing to other school districts as well. But is there a particular trend that you think we should be aware of that maybe didn't hit a material weakness in essence, but something in this past evaluation that maybe we should just consider?
Well, I think other than, I had mentioned the one item that we saw with the purchases, that they should, be aware of. But I don't think there's anything else that came across. I mentioned, normally with my other school districts, I can kind of see everybody's on the same trend each year. This was the first year where everybody kind of went in different directions. And so where we normally have seen trends just because, based on, it just depends. Like the year that when you don't have schools going to the bank anymore to deposit money, then you're going to see that finding's going to go away. So sometimes there's changes in rules that may affect the number of findings, but we didn't have anything like that this year that was significant. So again, I feel like at Polk County Schools, it was a very positive thing. There was nothing that raised my attention as, something to communicate with the district. So I think, again, it is that training, and I think it's coming along where it's starting to, it sometimes takes a little while for it to to see the effects of it, but I think we're starting to see that here. So nothing else that came to mind during
Nice.
the audit that I communicated or
Yeah.
wanted to communicate, so.
Excellent, thank you. So then that second question was for Ms. Matthews. Superintendent touched on it a bit to address some of the issues that we noted here. But any district-wide recommendations that you think as relates to maybe a brush up on a board policy or anything like that, that you can see of benefit?
Well, training is always very critical, and I know that the accounting staff, Lauren and Earl, developed a Schoology course that was required for schools to take on internal funds. And we've had discussions about maybe bringing back the live classes as well, because we used to have like a half-day workshop where the secretaries would come, principals were invited as well, and so much of what they learned is from each other. So I think there was probably value in that. So that would be my only comment, that I think that we might want to consider doing that, just to kind of add to the Schoology course and just be another format for training, because training, I think, is the key here.
All right, indeed. Great report. So this says a lot about the work that's being done at the district level as well, so thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions or comments. Thank you both very much. Board members, the next 4 items belong to Mr. McLemore. The next item up is the interlocal agreement between the School Board of Polk County and Polk County for sidewalks. Board members, just a little bit of history here, and several of you have been on the board, so you may recall this. This was a multi-year agreement that we had with the county, where we contributed $250,000 each year to help fund additional sidewalk installation. Well, we've reached the end of that contract. And while I know the topic of property taxes is circulating, and our municipalities are sharing concerns, as is our county, as far as the potential impact on them, this is not funded from that. So they would have a funding mechanism moving forward. And I'll let Mr. McLemore and the team discuss that with you further.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, superintendent. As the superintendent has already laid out, what is before you this afternoon is a request to actually renew an existing interlocal agreement that has existed between the Board of County Commissioners and the school board itself, in which the county would retain $250,000 in educational impact fees for the use really earmarked for sidewalks. And even within that auspice of sidewalks, this agreement lays out, okay, well, these sidewalks must be located within a 2-mile radius of schools. So it's not like these funds are being thrown in sidewalks that really do not benefit and aren't tied to the schools themselves. So again, educational impact fees. These are not coming from property taxes or, excuse me, sales tax revenues. They're coming straight from educational impact fees. And just a refresher, educational impact fees they come from new growth, new residential growth. So, and just really lastly, so how the BOCC or the county operates, how they decide where sidewalks go. The sidewalk does have a standing committee, the Sidewalk Advisory Committee, that's chaired by Jay Jarvis, who is the Director for Roads and Drainage. The school district does have a representative on that committee, Mr. Don Stevens. They do meet, and the images that are in the slide are just representative of some of their reports and committee briefings that they receive. So they do a lot of due diligence and analysis of recommending or identifying projects, but also prioritizing those projects. With that, I stand by for any other questions.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I know this came up several years ago, and I'm fully in support of building more sidewalks. One of the things that keeps coming up with Polk Vision within the pedestrian bicycle safety team is that we don't have enough sidewalks, especially near schools. I'm just curious, how much sidewalk can $250,000 buy?
So that is a great question.
Because it doesn't seem like it's nearly
About
enough.
250 feet.
So, okay.
It depends on existing conditions, how much improvements need to be made. Some of the other uses for this fund here is, in addition to just the material support, if, say, there isn't enough right-of-way, there's not enough room. So these funds could also help go towards property acquisition to make sure that there is space for the sidewalk itself. But to answer your question, I mean, it depends on price commodity points, averaging anywhere between $45 to $92 per linear foot. And that's a 5-foot wide, 4-inch thick sidewalk that meets county standards.
Okay. So my only question is that at some point we may need to look at, is that a reasonable amount? Do we need to, I mean, obviously, inflation has hit us rapidly over the past 10, 20 years since this was last looked at. So is that still the same amount that we should be doing as we did in previous years?
I haven't heard any
Okay.
inputs from the county side of it. The county funds, again, the majority of the sidewalk through their fund accounts.
Thank you.
There are no further questions or oh, Dr. Allen.
Thanks, Superintendent. Just to continue on that conversation, so, in the write-up here in the description of this item, it just noted the original document that this is sort of an addendum to that was produced, 10 years ago, right? And it says that there's a renewal in March. So this is just can you explain, this isn't the full document, because that interlocal agreement is a pretty extensive document. So is this just one element of that? And then are we going to discuss the broader agreement?
So I think we're mixing two different documents. So I think you may be referencing the interlocal agreement for school facility planning, which is concurrency and
Correct.
future school siting. This is an interlocal agreement, more of a mutual agreement between two political agencies.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
but yes, to answer your question, the interlocal agreement is being updated. We're meeting with our stakeholders, with the cities and the county, where it's just a lot to chug through.
Indeed. So it was good to have Sarah Beth ask that question first, because I know that's top of mind to her as well. So thank you.
No further questions or comments. The next item we have, board members, is the amendment to the installation of a wall at the Sheriff's Central District Command. Board had previously approved this, but this is a requested amendment to that approval. Mr. McLemore.
So the tenant, Polk County Sheriff's Office, they are requesting an amendment to what was already approved by this board based off of further analysis on site. And let me rehash this a little bit. The Polk County Sheriff's Office, they lease a piece of property from us from Westwood Middle School. The property is located in the southwest corner. And because of a recent residential development that has taken place just due west, as you can see from the site plan that's been inlaid here, that residential development is a multi-story development. You're talking 3 stories. And so the Sheriff's Office, by conducting their threat assessment and analysis, they've identified a possible risk here. And to mitigate that risk, they've proposed constructing an actual solid wall here, really to provide screen to the rear of their complex there. Again, based off of additional on-site meetings and discussions, they wanted to make an amendment to further lengthen how far to the east along the rear part of their property the wall will expand. And they're requesting to extend it, I think it's another 137 linear feet. This project is being paid entirely by the Polk County Sheriff's Office. The school board is not funding this. They are just adhering to the terms as required by the tenant that any physical construction or modification to the site, they have to first seek official approval for the school board. Pending your questions.
Ms. Miller.
Thank you. This might be I was looking out in the audience to see who's here. This might be a question for one of our sheriffs in the room or the superintendent. This was done in good faith, and it's a great service for that area of Westwood and Inwood. I went to Westwood. My grandmother lived on 28th Street, and I know the community is changing and needed that support there. So I think it's not only generous, but a great collaborative effort that we've done with the sheriff's office. I'm assuming that, we would do more collaborative efforts in the future if they have any sites that are available for us to work with. But I'm interested in how much we have volunteers, or does Westwood, because it's such a great school that needs that kind of support, is there anything that we do, not including that building, but with the personnel that run out of that office to help support Westwood? Have we made any relationships there with that sheriff's office staff with Westwood? Captain Shea, I'm looking at you. It's just a great location. I wish we had more substations in other areas of higher need that would benefit from building relationships with staff in your uniform.
Yes, I would. Obviously, we implore the deputies and the staff that work out of that building to engage the students, especially while they're out there during recess and everything else, to let them know, like as our program that we put out in the community, deputies are your friends. We want to make sure that those kids are engaging with us and that they know that we're their friends and they can approach us with information. Do I know of anything specific? No, but I have worked out of that office and I know that I would engage the kids while they're out there. So I'm sure it's still being done. It's something that we make sure is a part of that because, I mean, the fence is no taller than some of the kids that go to school there. So that on the backside.
And I understand, I mean, if we had all Captain Shays, then the world would be a better place. As we change leadership there, because the leadership is moving on, I just want to make sure they know, because your building could be there, but there could be a silent wall where they're not sure what they can do as far as communication. But I think we're missing an opportunity with that school and those students if we don't try to collaborate. And we can implore them, but I bet if you implored them, they'd be more implored than if I implored them.
I will be happy to
Thank you.
express that for you. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sharpless.
I just want to say, I think, I think it's, when the school board approved this back in the day, I think it was a very wise move. When you talk about having a substation directly next to a school site, you want to improve response time. I mean, you just hop over the fence, right? And so I'm with you, Board Member Miller. If we could see more of these kind of partnerships in some of our schools, I think it would be a great thing. No question, just comment.
No further questions or comments. Board members, the next item up is the corrective deed and resolution with Haines City for the Massey Road right-of-way dedication.
And so, Board, this afternoon, Council will correct me here. This is really, this matter is being brought back to help correct Scribner error that was made on the original recorded legal description and ordinance resolution. There was an incorrect legal description contained in the attached exhibits when this went to go and be recorded by the City of Haines City. That has since been resolved and corrected. So this matter just seeks to actually correct the typos that were contained in the original document.
Correct. I see no questions or comments. Thank you. Board members, the next item, Mr. Green, I'm sorry, did you want to share anything or you?
I can just, yeah, so it's being brought back on the consent agenda, and that's again the previous resolution and deed that had an incorrect legal description were recorded. So we need to kind of unravel that, get the correct version approved and re-recorded. So that's going to be put on the consent agenda this evening.
But the board had previously approved this.
Yes, yes.
Board members, the next item up is the draft for the comprehensive middle school rezoning. To let the board members give you a little bit of an update.
The Pinewood Elementary look for? Yeah.
Yes. Maybe I did that intentionally. But that's okay. Workshop, I don't know. Today's workshop is brought to you by the letter A. All right, so the next item is right-of-way dedication along Gilbert Street from Pinewood Elementary.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, members of the board, superintendent. This item before you this afternoon is the county seeking a right-of-way dedication along the frontage of Pinewood Elementary. What had existed here historically was something called a right-of-way easement. And typically an easement is not something you necessarily want in terms of a right-of-way. You would rather it be dedicated all outright, because think of it in terms, and specifically for this purpose, for right-of-way, you're talking about ownership. Who's responsible for what resides within that physical space of an easement? Whereas a right-of-way dedication, it then is dedicated to the public welfare or well-being for this case. But in this instance, the county owns Gilbert Street. It is a county-maintained road. The county is actually in the process of transferring jurisdiction for that to Eagle Lake, and it was in the process of them getting all their paperwork ready to do the official transfer that it was found that, hey, actually, there's a little bit of right-of-way dedication that needs to be accounted for and change that right-of-way easement to a right-of-way dedication to account for the improvements that the county has made along Gilbert Street, as well as some existing sidewalk. Pending your questions.
Seeing none. Board members, the next item is the draft comprehensive middle school rezoning. What I'd like to do is preface the conversation and presentation as the staff prepare with a little bit of clarification. This presentation was amended. Initially, it did have some maps, and even there are 2 middle schools that presently have an MSAP grant that will extend through 2028, according to staff. And so while we have every intention on bringing maps and zoning that would reflect magnet school zones for students within proximity to the school. And I'm trying to make sure that I don't use a word, because there's a word I used the other day in discussion with Ms. Wyatt that we use differently, and I don't want to add to the confusion. But essentially, there will be an attendance boundary for all of those schools. The board will ultimately have an opportunity to decide for both elementary schools and middle schools what percentage of the school's enrollment will come from immediate adjacency to the school. Whether that's 20%, 30%, 40%, you'll receive those maps. So for the sake of today's conversation, which was really primarily to highlight the timelines and do some other things, I pulled the maps out, but again, based off discussion with board members, and made sure that we would not mislead anyone and put information out there that would later become confusing because we had posted something here. So board members, just keep that in mind as we go through today's presentation. So I will turn it over to staff.
Good afternoon. I am going to really quick just go over some data with you, and then I'm going to let Mr. Coney come up and speak about our next steps for the ABC. So I know that this slide is, again, very data heavy. This is the results we got with the ABC when I spoke with you guys at the retreat, and we were talking about our next meeting with the ABC was going to be to look at all the middle school zones together. And wow, okay, I talk with my hands. So we did do that at our last meeting. And then this is the final data pulled with the most recent numbers. When you look at the columns, what you're seeing is where it says current zoned and then it says new zone and change. Please keep in mind those numbers, especially some of them might give you a heart attack when you see Boone. These are all the children that live in that zone. They don't necessarily go to Boone. They don't even necessarily go to one of our schools. They could be a charter school. These are just all the children we're tracking in the zone. So when we rezone, we have to make the note of how many kids totally live in the zone, how many kids we're moving out. So that's what you're seeing when you see those numbers. That's why that over towards the other end is the enrolled students. And you'll see that's a totally different number than the zoned students. So, but that's what we're keeping track of. But I did want to note, it's on here down there, the one thing we don't keep track of is private school students and homeschool students. So the others we have in there, we know the charter, we know the choice out, but we don't know the private and homeschool. So, but that's what that first column is. When we worked with the ABC, we figured out how many kids were currently in the zone. We figured out how many of those same kids would still be in the new zone and what the change was. When you see also the change in utilization, I just want to remind you, we're anticipating, just like we are with the high schools, with that soft enrollment, or a soft roll-up, we're anticipating most children are probably going to stay, the ones that are already enrolled. So those changes in utilization, it's not going to be, oh, we implement this and boom, we've got this change in utilization. It's going to take a few years to work through the system while the current students come out. And that's really, if you guys have any questions for me about the utilization before I hand this over to Mr. Coney, please let me know.
Ms. Wyatt?
I guess my question is, because we don't have included on here any of the 612 schools.
Correct. So, and because we're approving those with the high schools, we're not going to have a different boundary for the middle school portion. So that's actually part of the high school stuff that we've already gone through, and then those are set.
Okay. It would still be helpful to see those numbers on here, just
Okay.
for comparison. And also just in looking at where some of those students may or may not be going. But, yeah, I mean, Superintendent, and I talked at length about the magnet schools. My question is more for Superintendent Hyde. Can you give us what the two magnet schools are? And can we get something with confirmation that they go through 28? Because the last ones.
I'm sending that to you right now.
The last ones we approved were in 2022, which
So
means
you-
they should close in 27.
So my understanding is they have to go an extension through September 2028 while they do close in 27. We are submitting a no-cost extension through the end of 28. Those are Stevens Academy, Garner Academy, Blake Academy, Bethune Academy, and Daniel Jenkins Academies.
And you're going to send us also rationale for why we're extending those?
It's similar to why we've extended in the past. Either we still have remaining funds that we'd like to continue with those activities, but yes, I can provide that.
You can send us an explanation.
Mr. Sharpless?
I don't know if this is a question for you or for Mr. Coney. I'm not sure. And if it is one for somebody else, just tell me. We'll wait. But on the next steps, it mentioned that we're going to use the same PR strategies and communication plan that we did with the high school rezoning. And I was just wondering, my question is, what did we learn from that process? And was there anything that we can do to improve, our April meetings, our town halls, and that kind of stuff?
Okay, so it is technically what Mr. Coney's going to be speaking to in the next
Okay.
slide.
All right.
But would you like to answer that?
Okay.
Okay. If you want, if nobody else
We
has
can wait.
questions for me, I can hand it over to him.
Miss Wallace?
Okay, sorry. Sorry.
Hello. I just want to make sure I was interpreting the data correctly on the chart on slide 2, where when we're in the enrolled and utilization, I'm just looking at Boone, for example. I'm trying to make sure I understand the difference between the 75% versus 99%. Are we saying that's how the utilization would change after the rezone?
So, and that's why it's got the asterisk. So on Boone, on the schools, I know, sorry, to catch you up. So the
without
ones that have
portables,
the
that's
double are the ones that have portables or not.
I see.
And so, yeah, that first column is telling you what their utilization is with and without portables. And then the second column is telling you what the change would be with and without portables. And obviously, our ultimate goal is we're trying to eliminate portables. We can't just, boom, take them all out immediately, but that's one of the goals as well.
And one more follow-up, and I think this is connected to Mrs. Wyatt's question, is, and thank you for explaining all the nuances of each column, is just while looking at Boone, I noticed that there's close to 3,500 students that are potentially eligible to go, but we ultimately have 1,260, which is almost 1/3 of that. So are we aware, and that seems like a small proportion compared to some of these other ratios. So are we aware why that delta is pretty wide compared to some of those other ones?
So overall, our choice out for the district is a 30% kids choice out from their zone. But in areas where we may have more charter schools, in areas where, so they may have more choice, things like that can affect it. And so Boone is one of those that just has more choice out
All over the place, right?
than a regular or average. We just have these outliers sometimes, and that's one of them.
Okay, thank you, because I was thinking where the ones where there's some additional students that we could be serving is thinking about as we rezone is what do we do to make it extra attractive to come back to us. So thank you.
Mr. Keys?
Yeah, I was just going to speak to that too, is having served on that committee for, a long time on that one too. That one in that area, you have 2 choice out middle schools right in that general area and that are very, very popular. They go out both for a STEM program and arts program. So I was going to ask the same question because I didn't see those, but I thank you for answering and thank you for asking that question because that's when you see that number. If you ever walk along Boone too, that's a portable city out there. So to see what would go up to 99% utilization without those, obviously we want to try to get those to go away. But in addition to that, not along the subject line, but how fortunate are we when we built Scenic Terrace that was a big enough school to incorporate a middle school option, and we've seen some of that go there. And so you see that utilization on the same token, on the bottom one there, of current zoned and new zoned, and an up 86%. It's because that wasn't an option before, and that leads me to my question about that. Currently at Alta Vista, we are 6th grade, and we're going to be 7th grade and then 8th grade. Is that correct? So we'll see that number rise, and with that, hopefully, the utilization of Boone Middle go down. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
We are looking, so yes, Alta Vista is going to relieve Boone, but keep in mind that 86% is all the way through the 8th grade.
That's right. Okay.
So,
Fantastic. Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I also had a question on when were the current zoned and new zone numbers pulled? Or sorry, not the current, the zoned, the enrolled pulled? Because I had a couple schools that it looks like they may have way more students now than when those numbers were actually pulled. So just want to.
I just pulled them out of focus like 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so they are up to date then. Okay. Thank you.
I will say the current zoned and change zone stuff, we were still working on the FTE numbers,
Okay.
but I wanted to give you the enrollment as close as I could.
But the actual enrollment for
Yeah.
that, so those are students that are sitting in those seats today.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Coney?
Good morning. Good afternoon, Superintendent Hyde and board members. Terry Coney, chairperson of the Academic Boundary Committee. Before I start out with the timeline, I just want to remind everybody why we are doing this. And when we went through this with the high schools, we had several questions that came up. So we're doing it because of growth, maximize the utilization for the schools, and then we want to optimize our transportation resources for our students. So as you look at the timeline, and I think I mentioned this in the last presentation I gave with the high schools, this just didn't start within the last year when both board member Keys and Sharpless, we started the whole high school process. So this has been going on for a while. New high school coming up on the east side of the county caused the whole process to come to a halt or delayed for a little while until that site was finalized, and that's been finalized. So we started the process with high school. So we went through all the numbers with the staff, and starting the end of August through September and the first part of October, we did public presentations from Bartow High School, Lakeland High School, Winter Haven, Haines City, and finally McLaughlin. And I'm not sure how staff felt about it. We didn't get a lot of turnout, and we actually had some turnout from both middle school and elementary school parents because I guess they want to see, as their kids moved up, where their kids will be going, because we actually received a comment, I think it was from an elementary parent, that they moved to the area where they currently live because of the high school that was assigned to that particular area. So you have to keep in mind, we're starting at the high school level and going down, but some of our residents actually look at it going up. So you can take a look at the red line for the high schools, and we got a little bit extended because of some delays, so we're finishing up. At least you will approve the high school, hopefully tonight. We started the middle school process. You just saw the numbers, and hopefully we'll stay close to that timeline, and we'll move down to the elementary schools. So how's this all working? We gather the comments from the public through survey. We do a PR campaign, and then finally we do the town hall process. And again, going back to my experience when my kids were in school, there were more parent participation and engagement from the elementary school. It fell off a little bit in middle school, and then fell off a lot in high school, which I think most of you know we probably need more parent involvement at the high school level than at the elementary. But that's what we probably can foresee as we go through these next town halls. So that may mean that we may have a little more participation when we talk about the middle schools, and probably going to have a lot more participation when we talk about the elementary schools. So in March, we'll go through the PR strategies, and The timeline for the town halls will be through the month of April. You can see the dates, the 9th, 16th, 23rd, and the 30th. And just like with the high schools, we finalized with a virtual presentation, which we did here. And then we will, in June, after staff gets the chance to look at all the information, it'll be presented to the work session. Are there any questions? Well, thank you for your time.
Wait, Mr. Sharpless.
I was just the question that I had posed earlier. What did we learn? Have we learned anything from the first go around in the high school as far as our PR strategies, how to increase participation? I know you mentioned that just the simple fact of elementary school parents being more involved. I was just wondering if we learned anything through our committee to how potentially why do you think there was a low participation rate? And that could also be a question for Mr. McLemore too.
Well, again, some parents, as their kids get older, they feel like they don't need to be as much engaged. Now, as far as the public feedback, I'll turn that over to staff.
So I want to remind the board, please, to direct questions through the superintendent, to direct staff. But you're fine, Mr. McLemore. But specifically, we've addressed this question before. The high school lack of participation, I think we're assuming that physical bodies present in the room means a lack of participation. Please keep in mind that this was well covered by all local media outlets. It was well covered in social media. It was all over our Facebook page. It was well communicated, not just by the district, but by every single respective school repeatedly about upcoming meetings and those types of things. I think additionally what needs to be factored into this is the reality that we offer so much school choice. And so every time you've looked at data, in particular about the high schools that you've seen, when 40% of students are not attending their zone school because they're pursuing an option, that's why I don't think parents are having the reaction that some of you may anticipate or the general public may anticipate, because we do offer so much choice. Far more so than many others. And I think that creates the opportunity, but this has been well communicated. The only thing that we said, that I shared at the last meeting when we talked about the middle school and elementary town halls, was that we would increase the number. There's no way physically that staff can address every single elementary and middle school, but we will make sure to offer multiple options within each region, because we want to afford and make sure parents have that voice. And surveying, communication tools, all those things will be utilized again, because it has been successful to date.
And all I simply asked was just, what lessons did we learn? And I think those are all kind of lessons that we learned. I don't see why I have to feel like, I mean, I can ask a question. I don't understand the problem
Not
there.
the staff. The questions from the board are supposed to be directed through the superintendent,
Okay. My point is, all I wanted to know is what kind of lessons did we learn? So thank you for addressing that.
So in doing a debrief and after-action review of how the town halls were conducted, we met collectively as a team, and we looked over our notes and brainstormed how do we think we could make participation better. And a good point was raised on our staff was, well, what if we've pushed the start time from 5 to 5:30? This allows parents a little more time to get home from work, get the kids settled, and then try to get to a town hall meeting. So that's something we're looking at addressing and possibly adjusting when we do these next rounds of town halls.
Ms. White?
Thank you. And I appreciate looking to do our town halls, not just one in each, district, because it can be we're a very large county, so only holding 6 of them, having one within 30 minutes of you is not necessarily guaranteed. So I'm hopeful that especially when we look at South County, we'll look at maybe doing one in each of those communities as opposed to having them combined, because I know that was one of the issues last time, is that it's a long ways when you're down there. I have a few questions that are more specifically as we're looking forward on the middle school. I sent a follow-up email just on the MSAP and extension and getting more information as to why we're extending, how much money's left. It's still over a year and a half out, so I'm confused as to why we are anticipating not spending it down in time. I currently would not be supportive of extending it because I don't want to get us into a position where we can't properly zone the schools in year one, and we're going to have to do a phased-in approach to rezoning the middle schools to be able to partially zone some of those magnet schools, which I think is important to be able to launch it all at once. So if we can't do it all at once in 27, then we may need to push back rezoning until 28, which I know is not the ideal situation because we need to do it sooner rather than later. So updated information on that. But I wanted to make sure it was on the record here as well because sometimes things get lost in translation. So when can we expect to see the new maps? Because if they're talking about doing the town halls in April and it has to come to us first, and February starts on...
You will start seeing the maps for middle school in particular in February, because there's not a lot that has to be done. As I mentioned, you're going to get a heat map that shows a 10% radius, a 20% radius, 30% radius, 40% radius. It'll all be overlapping, and then that ultimately will be the tool that you can use to decide. And that's what we intend to capture there will not be students that require transportation, unless the parents choose to do that because of proximity to the school. But those would be students within that 2-mile radius. But we want to make sure the numbers align. The other issue, just to kind of touch on the MSAP grant, while we're looking at the renewal, it could be because the federal deadline is much sooner. It's not at the end of the fiscal year. It's an ongoing, and I'd have to get you that information as well. I'll include that. Additionally, I need to make sure that even if we decide, the board decides, based off a recommendation from our office, to either accept the extension request or to deny the extension request and return any unspent funds, I need to make sure that that doesn't expose us to funds that have already been spent and that we're not going to have to repay additional dollars, number one. And then number two, I don't know if there's a timeline post-MSAP grant that we must remain in compliance with the grant outlines before we're allowed to do what we're about to do for other schools that have exited from MSAP grants historically. So there's a little bit more to it, so I just need time with staff.
Okay. If we could get that information before the next work session.
Absolutely.
That would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
I don't know what that note to myself was. The last question I had was so I know you're bringing us the heat maps. So after that, the maps will come to us based on what heat map we select that will actually have those within that heat. So if we select the 10%, anyone within the 10% would be zoned to Garner.
Correct.
They wouldn't be zoned anywhere else. They would be zoned to Garner.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
If it was, yeah, for yes.
Or
Yes.
whichever level okay.
Yes.
So it will come to us twice then. We'll get
Excluding.
the heat maps.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we'll
Excluding
get the.
parental choice.
Yes. So the heat maps and then we'll get the actual maps.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Commissioner Coney. So neat to be able to call you that. Thank you for your service. Thanks to all your colleagues who served, and just appreciate that. And knowing that you're involved helps me trust the process even further. So thank you. I just wanted to make a observation and a comment based on one of the things that a parent shared with you about how they intentionally purchased a home to access a school. Is that is a form of school choice. That's a means-tested form of school choice too, because we know there's certain houses in Polk County where if they're in one zip code, they're worth something, and you could pick up that same house and drop it in another address, and it would be worth something completely different. And oftentimes, that value is attached to what school it's zoned to. And so it is National School Choice Week, and I just wanted to say that, I'm glad you guys are looking at and giving us this information so we can understand that there are people who had to make price, had to spend certain amounts of money, but that at the end of the day, I support robust choice because I never want our public schools to be whose access is for sale to the highest bidder. That it really is that we do allow people who, regardless of what address they can or cannot afford, that they have multiple options. And so I know this is creating more complications, but it doesn't mean we can't solve them. So thank you.
Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Commissioner Coney. I again wanted to congratulate you on your new position and staying involved in our committees even after you're taking on more responsibility. I think that will be part of the messaging. High schools don't usually draw, because of the choice and because of how legislation was made under the Rick Scott administration about choosing that high school student or high school for your student, that it is much more easy. It's much more easy for the parents not to have it on the forefront of high school like they would elementary. The main comments I heard were from parents of students in elementary schools who were concerned about magnet zones, which are based on your high school zone. And I think that was really the only concerns we heard back. I think part of our PR effort, like many things, even we have community meetings on support services, ESC services, unless it's happening to you, a lot of people just push it back because their days are crowded with their schedules and their work and their children. I think it's going to be an ongoing messaging that we have to do. I hope that we can include it, and we have already, but to continue to include it in our updates to the superintendent's newsletter that goes out. I think it would be helpful to have that newsletter go to our elected officials in the cities who will also get these calls sometimes. And in the county, I think we should make their PR teams aware of this information so they have it, as well as the realtors and the others. You know, as a licensed broker, that is information that could go permanently on a chamber site and or at least a link on chamber sites and or the Lakeland Realtor Association or Bartow Association sites, so it's easily accessible. So if someone calls, we can refer them over. But I appreciate the work done on this, and I think it will get, unfortunately, a little more in the weeds as we go to middle and elementary, but in the end, it's going to be better for our families and for our county. When we talk about choice, we have to mention that we're one of maybe any or very few districts that still bus for choice. And that is a hard decision to make as we're currently funded. So as we make these decisions, unfortunately, people may have less choice if it comes down to providing transportation. But that's why we're working so hard to duplicate programs around the district. I just want people to know that this is going out, and if we can extend those channels, it would just make it easier for everyone. Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
Thank you, Superintendent Hyde. I had a question concerning the funds, so if you can get clarity on that, what happens to the funds if we don't utilize them, the magnet, so.
Yeah, so any unused funds would have to revert back to the federal government. The question, though, is if we have, I don't know if there's a caveat in there, because some grants will, that if we've not fulfilled the grant obligation, are we then responsible to return the entirety of the fund or a larger portion of the fund? So we just need some time to review the grant application and make some calls to USED and find out what potential implications there would be. And then I'll include, as Ms. Wyatt requested, we'll include the remaining fund amount for each one of the schools that would be affected.
And it's going to be very important, so thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with Mr. Coney about the high school interest for parents would not be as important for high schoolers. I remember when my son was in high school, he really wanted to be detached from his mom. And so I think middle school would draw interest, but elementary for sure. And I think that from the presentation that the staff did at the retreat, I don't remember which staff member talked about the outstanding job that the public relations department did when we were working on the rezoning for the high schools. So I think we just need to continue to use those techniques and enhance it. And I definitely think that we need to transition from 5 o'clock to maybe 5:30 or 6, because parents are trying to get home and traffic is very heavy during that time. And I just think we need to make it more amenable for them. Those would be my comments.
Dr. Allen?
Thanks, Superintendent. Just a fruitful conversation. Mr. Coney, thank you for being here and your leadership with our Attendance Boundary Committee as well. And I think it's good to put this in that broader context as well. Obviously, we're addressing high school rezoning tonight. We're voting on that as a board. And then, if we look around, we're seeing surrounding districts openly grapple with utilization. Orange County, Brevard, I think even Pinellas addressing utilization drops. And you noted it, we're doing this in regards to growth. And we are blessed as a county and across the state as it relates to growth. So when we think about that, yes, we want the best educational experience for our students. This is all about our students. But if you look at the highlight of the state audit findings from last year, I think it's really important to consider and look at the top 25 school districts with the highest level of growth in the last 5 years, and only focus on the larger districts within that 25. Polk County would be the top, right? 13.6 percentage growth within the last 5 years. The closest to us being Duval, maybe 6. So in this broader conversation around, utilization drops, we haven't had to deal with that. And, that's a positive thing right now. And so I think the work that we're doing is so important because of that as well. So I just want to say thank you to the committee. And I did have one question, and I've, sent some questions to the superintendent. This was a question that came up in the most recent attendance boundary committee. And one I think is foundational for this work as well is how intentionally we are using the boundary adjustments to reduce the reliance on portables. That was a question that came up. Superintendent, really hope that as we're going through this, we have a strategy in place to effectively reduce that footprint around the district. So I appreciate the wise work that we're doing on this. This is very important work, so thank you.
Dr. Allen, we did discuss this briefly either during a retreat or during a workshop. I provided the board with all of the analysis on portable utilization. But that's going to be a much larger conversation about enrollment and rezoning, because while rezoning will help us accomplish probably 60–70% of what we're trying to address, the other part's just going to have to require some aggressive and brave decisions by the board. And I understand the position it puts the board in, because we're going to have to cap enrollment at schools. Because our historical solution, so if we establish a boundary, and given the fact that we haven't touched boundaries in over 10 years, states that this is not something that we adjust on an annual basis, nor should be, because that's very disruptive. But our response then is, for a community then that sees growth, is we add a bunch of portables to a school. And then we end up on the hook for even having to purchase those, lease those, and then maintain them. And really what we should do, and the recommendations that we will bring before the board to help address this topic moving forward, is cap enrollment. And unfortunately, when a school hits its enrollment cap, that means that student can only attend the next closest school. We then have an obligation to transport that student, but we are going to have to come up with some other solutions in addition to that for the board to consider, because those are tough decisions that have to be made. I agree, we need to reduce our overall footprint on our portables, and we have consistently been doing that throughout this year. Any portable that's not being utilized is being removed, being disconnected, so that or reassigned elsewhere. The 3 high schools that have the largest number of portables will be addressed with the opening of a new high school. And unfortunately, that's just the reality for those areas right now, because we don't have any place else to displace those students. Unless the board directed me or requested of me to have staff evaluate the possibility of adding additional classroom space on those campus in permanent facilities. For example, adding a wing, another 2-story wing to Ridge, another 2-story wing to Haines City, another 2-story wing somewhere at Davenport High School. Those are the kinds of things we'd have to talk through that are alternatives to enrollment cap. But enrollment cap is a strategy that's used by many districts. It can be frustrating, because if the enrollment cap is met and the student literally lives across the street or moves in over the summer, then they may have to go 5–6 miles away to attend the next closest school. But it is a process that can be managed, and that's the only way to truly start to move in that direction to eliminate those portable classrooms. We've talked about this before. I don't believe that they provide the same educational opportunities and experiences to students, especially when we start talking about labs and those types of things. So this is a much bigger conversation moving forward. I do have the data that you requested. Staff were able to provide that to me, specific to high schools. There are 2 high schools I need to confirm, Tenor Rock and one other, because the number of portables being utilized and the number of available portables on the campus for one of the schools does not match. So I want to go back to staff, confirm those numbers, and then I'll share that with the whole board.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Keys.
Mr. Coney, Commissioner Coney, I just wanted to say thank you. There's a lot of information that's been shared, but having been in the role that you're in and knowing the amount of time that it takes, the questions that are asked, I just wanted to commend you for always being involved and continue to be involved, and thank you for taking part in this. We appreciate you.
There are no further questions or comments. Thank you.
I just want to make a closing comment. Actually like to thank all the school board members that came out to the public town halls. For each public town hall meeting, there was at least one school board member, and I think most there are at least two. We actually had one elected county official there, and I think that made a difference. We had the media, especially at the first one, and then at a virtual. And when I spoke and gave the numbers, each slide really showed the importance of the rezoning and eliminating the portables. So I think that information got out to the public, especially for the schools on the east side of the county, to show the numbers of the percentage of students with and without the portables, especially at Haines City High School. So I think staff did a great job putting all those numbers together, and I appreciate the continual working with you and the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Board members, the next item before you that we'll do a quick presentation on and share on is procedures regarding travel and expenses. These are administrative procedures. During one of our previous meetings, there was an obvious need for us to clarify procedures related to a policy, and that policy is Policy 6550. And again, it's administrative, which covers all of our staff, in particular senior staff and others, but that was done intentionally to make sure that everyone understands explicitly how to do certain things, because there are some areas when it comes to travel and or allowances that were unclear and allowed for speculation. And so it's my intent as superintendent to provide those procedures. This is not a board action, this is my action. And while I'm not required to disclose those procedures, it is something I do repeatedly for the board. I provide you copies of memos, I provide you copies of technical assistance papers that go out to our staff, our administrators, and so this is a matter of transparency. How it is related to the board was there have been questions about inclusion of such practices in the executive assistant's handbook, but also in a board handbook. And so that's why this was brought for you. Number one, I'm sharing with you what I'm sharing with our staff as far as expectations from the school district, and then wanted to get some feedback and some conversation going with the board as it relates to, do you want to see this amended to reflect the board's needs? Because there are some things listed here that do not apply to the board. For example, the board does not complete TDAs. But there are some other things in there that the board may wish to go ahead and include in the handbook and in the procedure guide for the executive assistant's office. So I'll open it up for any questions or comments. Ms. Miller.
We might have this scheduled already, but I think as Mr. Green, and I've kept him busy, unfortunately, with trying to define things, we need a retreat. I know you have a retreat, but when we have time as a board, I would like to request a few minutes just to talk about the board side of this, which is different than what we're doing today, because I don't know if we have a current policy or if the policy needs to be amended for that. This got convoluted, and I think that's where a lot of the confusion happened. But I would love to, along with that budgetary conversation for board members, that be included with travel, so we can best understand best practice and what our responsibilities are to the public. Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. I have one of the things I was going to bring up in board comments today is our policy, because I think that the policy that governs board members is different than the policy that covers staff. And some verbiage changes in our policy that may clean things up and make it mirror what state law is. But I think part of that too may need to say in our policy that that we are to follow the same guidelines when it comes to booking hotels, things like that, as is in process for the rest of the district. And Mr. Green, I know that you are really good at wordsmithing those things and making them legitimate. So that is the idea that I would like to put in, because I think that it can be as easy as, it needs to follow the same process as we do for the rest of the district, that it should be government rates, that it should be for rental cars or for hotels or anything like that.
Was that to put it in policy or in your handbook?
Just to put it in the handbook, but that policy may need to refer to
Okay.
that we are to follow the same processes as when it comes to booking.
Because I share this with the rest of the board, just for background, there's a request for Mr. Green, and we were discussing it earlier, to revisit the policy, I think that was adopted in 2019, 2014. The concern is a simple edit to that's going to be a 2-month timeline because of the requirements for advertisement and public hearing. So thank you for clarifying, because it would make more sense for it to refer to the board handbook or procedural guide, which we can edit instantaneously, does not require that same thing, then put it into policy. So I just want to make sure I caught that correctly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Fields.
I was just gonna say, I would think it would need to be in the handbook, and making sure that whatever the requirements are for the general staff, that we are also abiding by that, and it's very clear, especially for new board members.
Thank you. Mr. Green.
Yeah, just to reiterate that the board travel is based on policy 0147.1. These procedures here are to interpret and provide further guidance on policy 6550. So these procedures are helpful. They might serve as a foundation for, future guidance for the board members, but they're not. I think there was confusion because the coincidence of me replacing the TDA form with the form that the policy requires, the timing of that kind of coincided, and so there was some confusion as to what applies to what. I've already asked staff to look at the policy to try to bring it more in line with the statute, because the policy right now is a little more restrictive on what it requires as far as approvals for out-of-county travel. So they're going to look at that and try to bring those in line. And then with that, they can also use the existing procedures to create a document that will be more helpful for the board members in their travel.
Thank you. There are no further questions or comments. Next item, board members, we have Florida's Future, powered by public schools. This is a joint initiative. Mr. Geary has been selected, I think I shared this with you briefly previously, to help lead this initiative across the state with several other key PIOs from other large districts. And they've worked collaboratively with other smaller districts and have found that many of them may not have the same resources or opportunities. And so the goal here is to continue to reiterate the importance of public schools and to celebrate those things and move away a little bit from the competitive aspect between districts and more of a collaborative effort to continue to support the benefits of what we do each day and how student outcomes we share in that. So I will turn it over to Mr. Geary for today's brief presentation and discussion.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, school board. I just wanted to go over an initiative that we're really excited to be a part of. Mr. Hyde gave a very nice overview of this. This is an initiative that we are doing in conjunction with FADS. So just to kind of give you the macro level of what this is the various communications departments throughout the state of Florida are going to be working together on this. So the various versions of myself and other folks throughout the districts are taking part in a campaign to celebrate the importance and the value of public schools throughout the state of Florida. This is a campaign to celebrate good news. It's mainly meant to work together to amplify our message, basically have us rowing in the same direction with the good work that we're already doing. This allowed me to be able to meet my counterparts throughout the state of Florida over in a fall conference with FADS. It was a great experience. We learned a lot from each other, made great connections, and have all been working together on this in the months since then. And it was extremely interesting to see various levels of, size of districts. You have large ones, you have small ones. We all kind of face the same kind of challenges and struggles together. And it was interesting to see like how we are attacking different problems, and we realized we could learn a lot from each other. And that's really what this comes down to. We're doing good work. Let's just do good work together. And the purpose of this, again, is to amplify good news stories throughout the various districts of Florida. And it's a high-level campaign meant to simply celebrate what our public schools bring and the value that they have in our communities. The campaign itself is called Florida's Future, Powered by Public Schools, because truly that's what this is what this is about. Our school system, the majority of folks and families choose to be in our public schools because there is great value there. And it's an idea to celebrate the programs and all the initiatives, all the different things that we do that help bring great positive stories to our district and allow us to be able to impact the lives of students in a great way. Our target audiences are varied. This includes folks who are already within our schools because we want them to understand that where they're at is a great place and understand the great things that are there. It's to also reach out to those who aren't in our schools to show them what they could have if they are going to have students. Miami-Dade brought up a great point, and it was a neat idea. They have a bib program where they have bibs that have their school district on there, and they provide them to new parents, to new mothers. These are folks who aren't really even thinking about enrolling their kid in a school at all, and yet that's one of the free gifts that they get right when they're there. There are great ideas to reach those parents that aren't even in the school system. We shared our Camp Early Bird program with folks there about that's one of the things that we do to try to reach out to our incoming kindergartners or folks who've never been in a preschool program. A lot of folks were interested about that. The good news is in addition to working together on this, we're learning from each other, and it's really been exciting to be able to work with other districts on that and kind of get different ideas from each other. The other target audiences, mainly a huge one was the student voice, because ultimately that's what makes the difference. If you know that a student actually loves the program, the school and whatever it is that lights the fire in them, that's what actually shows the value of our school system. So between that, alumni, famous alumni, but even just anybody who's doing well, that shows people that we are preparing them for great futures, and it'll help solidify the value that we're bringing. But again, these are all different groups that we're talking about here. Even community members who don't have children in our schools need to know that we're preparing the police officers, the nurses, the various other folks who are going to provide great services to them throughout their community. We also want to be able to celebrate our educators and school staff, the backbone and the very foundation of what we do, and local businesses and organizations that we work with and that we partner with to help build strong workforces, and our elected officials who influence the public and the decisions and policy matters that impact us. We've already begun phase one, and that has been in this month. There was a soft rollout this month to begin celebrating various themes each month, and you'll see in a moment there is a timeline for different with a lot of thought put into the natural occurrences of the school district and the school year. The various school districts are going to be working together on these targeted themes from January through May, and we're building out from June forward also. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the goal is to look at the unparalleled academic and extracurricular activities, opportunities, services, and resources that our public schools provide. A huge benefit that a lot of the TR departments were very interested in, and communications department, was creating think of it as a clearinghouse of different resources they can use, various templates and Canva-related materials that they can use, so flyers, scripts, story starters, things like that even the smaller districts who may not have a full-fledged communications team could easily tap into, and they can join into this, again, to be a part of this statewide campaign. These are some of the, for instance, these are some of the templates, the flyers that were put together. They're easily convertible by all the different districts, especially our smaller districts. They're able to utilize some of these and be able to take part in our campaign if they don't have a team that can help out with it. Here's some more. So here are our initial themes. January was the Acceleration Pathways Month. Most districts are kind of like us. Our school choice priority window is open. This is the point where you have students that are seeking out programs like IB, ACE, and our dual enrollment, and are interested in these different things. This was an opportunity for us to begin, so we've started doing that, celebrating our various acceleration pathways. Next month, February, is going to be STEM, CTE, and our magnet programs. Again, March is arts, sports, and school-sponsored extracurricular activities. April is our various student support services. In May, because we all are graduating, that's our chance to be able to celebrate graduations. But this also includes more than just high school graduations. This is even, the various end-of-the-year celebrations that our schools have at the elementary and the middle school level. It's a celebration of you've completed another year and what have you learned. Phase 2 is when we're going to be coming up with our topics for July through November. July, we expect that we're going to be working on our summer learning opportunities. I mentioned Camp Early Bird. Obviously, we'll focus on that. We'll showcase what are we doing during the summer to keep kids up to speed and learning. And then August is our back to school, will be our back to school theme, the various things that folks need to know and to celebrate the love of learning and the getting back in the groove of the school year. The advertising campaign is something that all the PIOs know that funds are limited, and this is something that FADS is exploring, whether there's any kind of resources that could be available for streaming ads. And if there was, then we find an equitable way to utilize those resources to, again, have a high-level campaign that just celebrates school districts and public schools throughout the state of Florida. We don't know if that's available yet, but at the same time, FADS is exploring that as an option. Again, phase 1 is meant to just get us all moving in the same direction, amplifying the same themes.
As Mr. Geary pointed out, one of the benefits to having a large-scale initiative is that smaller districts whose PIO may serve in several different roles and may have competing interests or needs or demands on their time and resources, what they're creating is a repository of graphics, of content, and where everyone can personalize it to their individual school districts. We will soon have a draft website that we will start posting this information to. It'll also be posted on our website, but there's more information coming so that we can continue to share the good news about Polk County Public Schools and public education in general. So, Mr. Sharpless.
Hey, Mr. Geary. I know that the Florida School Board Association was working on a similar initiative a year or two ago, and I'm thankful that FADS has taken this up as well. I believe FADS taking it up, certainly, and using public information officers certainly helps make it some more legitimacy behind it. Just know there is appetite on the FSBA side to make sure this is a success, so I hope FADS can partner with us there. I noticed, one of the things it said here is that that back on the primary audience, it said that it's crucial to include the student voice. And I certainly agree wholeheartedly with that. I mean, our motto is students first, right? And so I'm just wondering, what mechanisms do we have in place to capture that authentic student stories, things like that? Like, how are we going to do that?
I think there's different ways that you could do it. Obviously, we could create videos, and we could do promotional videos that show our students in programs enjoying the resources, posts on social media as well, and even amplifying and showing what our different schools are doing in terms of celebrations that they do, and allowing the students to be able to express what is it that they like about our schools. That really is the true proof of it. So I think it's a combination of using our storytelling abilities to focus on not saying that they're having a great time, but actually letting them say it and bringing them in to do it.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have.
Ms. Miller.
Hello, Mr. Geary. Thank you. I'm interested in creating a similar Dropbox and/or storehouse for our schools. Like when I text you and say, this just happened, we don't have the staff to cover all of these schools and all the many things that are happening. If I'm thinking of other private companies and private organizations that have either Canva with all the same logos, so we're on brand for everything we're doing, Dropbox for elementary schools to get what's happening. We have great things happening, and I know we're 7 different arms to the PR department who try to get out and share with the community what's happening. But I would love to see some, and this is a tech issue. I'm sure it's easy enough to have something where schools could drop into what's going on. I don't know how they're currently reaching out to you, or if they're just using their own social media and you guys it looks like you guys pull from what's already posted. It would be great for them to be able to drop stories and photo quality that you can use, or whatever have your branding needs, where they can see that and then drop that into one area, box, tech, whatever that is. So you can pull them quickly and be able to replicate the stories throughout all of our channels. I just, unless I'm pushing District 7, I have one school, I think every teacher has social media, and they are doing amazing things. But they have no way to tell their story, and they're just telling it to their parents. And in Auburndale, I would love for the whole community to know that, because they need to know what's available. So any ideas you have on that, or we can have separate meeting, talk later. The superintendent can give us all the great things that are happening. I just would like to see, I'm great that we're doing that for the state to tell our story and help these other districts, but I think within this district, we have so many things happening, and I'd love to streamline how we get that to you.
Very good. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And to your point, there are some of the information that we get is sort of looking at our school districts, our school sites, and repurposing it and talking with them. And some of them reach out to us, and we work with them on it. So it's a little bit of both, but I think it's a really nice idea. It's also really great whenever we do a social media post, or a school does, and you see other schools commenting on the post saying, what a great idea, we should do that here. I think a lot of that is a sharing of ideas, and the more that we work together, the better it benefits us all. But yes, thank you for the idea.
There are no further questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Board.
This time, Mr. Chair, audience members, we will need to clear the room for a closed session. So thank you all. We will reconvene afterwards.
At this time, I would like to call the meeting back to order and turn it over to Superintendent Hyde to finish leading off our work session today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, new business, or excuse me, superintendent's report has been concluded. There are two items under information items. These are reoccurring items for the board's background and understanding. And then you have the board meeting agenda. So at this point, I will turn it over to you, and please feel free to call upon me for the two new business items or any of the new business items you need clarification on.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board members, if we could at this time, I'd like for us to go over our agenda for this evening's meeting. So if you can transition right now, give you a second to our board meeting for the agenda. Okay. So with our agenda review, are there any questions on sections A through F? That's the opening items through approval of the consent agenda. What about sections G through K? Seeing none. Sections L through N? Sections L through N? All right. How about sections O through T? All right. Section U, the action agenda. Are there any questions? Section V, the public hearing. I recognize Dr. Allen.
Yeah, I'm just going back to you. Was just, and I, again, appreciate all the work that Superintendent Hyde has done to sort of try to help me through this process on the land assignment for the BBB High School and Mr. Green. Again, I think there's thorough elements to this process, but I had asked Mr. Green just to give an update on some of the questions I had. I know, Superintendent, I've pushed a few questions your way as well, just for clarification. I'm just trying to work through my seeds of doubt on this decision. So I don't know if Mr. Green would be willing to maybe address some of the questions I've had, and Superintendent, if you can as well.
Mr. Superintendent, would you like me to start?
Mr. Green, if you could, because I'm looking for my email response to Dr. Allen this today.
Sure. So, well, let me pull that up because I have it as well. So I think one of, maybe both of the questions relate to the 2024-25 work plan. And in that work plan, I don't know if the timeline that you sent has this date, but I believe the work plan came out after the interim agreement was signed, which was in April of 2025. In the work plan, it was a spreadsheet that one of the line items had to do with the new school project. And there was an estimate for what the price would be, and it was north of $200 million. As we know from the interim agreement, the BAFO, best and final offer amount, is in the $180 million range. So one of the questions is, why is there a discrepancy? And I think the answer is, from best I can tell, that work plan was drafted, or the estimates in there, those figures are estimates that predated the interim agreement. That has to do with the discrepancy with the BAFO. The other item that's within that same line item has to do with the design fee, which was in the $5 million range. And prior to that work plan coming out, the district had engaged Schenkel Schultz to do design work for a project that was described as C330, which is not the P3 project. It was a different project. So they were engaged to do design work for that project. Since that time, the P3 is the project that the district decided to move forward with via the P3 project and the interim agreement. So one of the questions was, was that firm engaged? The answer was yes, but we didn't follow through with that particular work. There was no design work for that C330 project. Subsequent question is, well, where'd that money go? And I believe that line item, or that amount that was reserved, was used for the design of the P3 project. And as it turns out, Fortress retained Schenkel Schultz to do the design work. So that money was incorporated into the money is used to pay for that fee. And just at this point now, we're at the getting toward the end of the design work. We're in phase 3, which is the almost 90% done part of the project. I believe next week we'll be getting the final documents from Fortress, and they'll be reviewed by the Facilities Division on, to cross the Ts. But that's where we are with that, and I hope that answers the questions that were outstanding.
So Dr. Allen had submitted to me a few questions today. I know that one's a reoccurring question, which was the board had initially approved the purchase of this property, but the district made a decision not to execute it. And that's the best decision, that's the best answer I have at this time, because I believe this took place just as I was transitioning. I do recall, and I will have to go back and watch the board meeting, but I do recall several board members having concerns about paying full price for a property that included acreage that was deemed swampy. I'm trying to figure out, or wet, and was unbuildable. And so at that time, while Ms. Usher had made the recommendation to purchase that, I believe that ultimately we made a decision not to pursue that because of those concerns and paying full price for land that would never be able to be developed. Some of you were on the board at that time, Ms. Wyatt, Ms. Miller, Ms. Fields, and Dr. Allen, but you recall that we did make an effort here because we even talked about that school becoming an environmental academy and that we could partner with the University of Florida and put some decking out there into that marshland, wetland area. That was a better phrase, wetland, other than swampy. And see if we could include that into some type of STEM academy in conjunction with them. We started some initial discussions, but again, the property, I'd have to go back and see when the decision was made not to procure that property. The difficulty of answering that question right now, as you are aware, I've got 2 senior admins who are no longer in their positions right now, and they're dealing with other issues. So I'm going to have to do more hands-on due diligence with the team to dig into that, Dr. Allen and the rest of the board members. But I did provide in my update to the board that this is a different property. It's the same property, but a smaller footprint, and that some of that land was excluded. I believe I provided you visuals that show that mapping. And then in addition to that, what staff have shared with me is that at that time, when we had made some assumptions about portions of the property, when the due diligence was performed, it was determined that it was not in the state that we had anticipated, that it was buildable property, buildable land. And so those are some of the differences there. So I very much understand and respect the position that Dr. Allen has taken, that, we could have bought it cheaper then. Unfortunately, we did not. But I think that's the best explanation I can provide you at this time. I think Mr. Green, I'll stop saying I think, Mr. Green's provided a response as it relates to the 5.8 million. There were other questions that board members submitted. One's been a reoccurring question because I think there's this myth or assumption out there that Shingle Schultz got paid for work, but I think Dr. Allen can attest, he even engaged Ms. Matthews, who did a dive on your behalf as a board, because she reports to you, so there's no undue influence from my office, and she was able to confirm that no money had been spent or paid to Shingle Schultz for that first project. So they're now engaged, not because the district engaged them, but because Fortress engaged them. So I think there's a little bit of maybe question there. And arguably, it comes down to if that initial bid was at that $5 million mark, we never engaged, we never paid that, but now that's the same bid they've given the Fortress. I think that's where maybe some of the confusion may be coming. But Dr. Allen, my response to you earlier, I said, please allow me some time to confirm that and be able to respond. So I believe, for the most part, that answered the questions. Mr. Green, I think those were the questions that we had to answer previously.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, and I think it was important to me to think, okay, well, was that 5.8 capital, was it just a rollover? So then in essence, there's a benefit there, because when I look at the work plan and see that 5.8 that landed in that column, so my direct question on that was, does that 5.8 connect to the 182 BAFO, right? And is it a part of that 182 BAFO? And I think that was the unresolved question. I think the timeline's important as well. When we had that ITN, And their document, from Fortress came back to us. Our request was for us to open the doors at this particular time. So then if we juxtapose that in regards to less like our, high school approval tonight, those schools that are at major capacity, the timeline is detrimental to us. So I'm not here to be an obstructionist, but I'm here to say that, from a governance standpoint, when we vote on something, it should be executed, right? I think that's an extremely important thing from a fiduciary standpoint. So I'm not, I just think some of those unresolved questions, especially around cost, is important to me as well. So, the 182 it's a BAFO, but it's not our gross maximum because we don't even know what the gross maximum is at this point. So when I saw the work plan, that's a dramatic change as well, right? So I'm just, all those initiatives, so, whether the work plan was not the accurate estimate, that's a good question, and, I appreciate that, whether it was not or is something that could be amended in the future, I'm not sure. So those are really the things I'm sort of not in favor for, and I'm not comfortable voting in favor of. And not to obstruct the process. I see the capacity issue, and we need a high school really bad. And but I appreciate the work that Mr. Green's done and Superintendent on this side.
I commit to doing some more personal due diligence in this regard, but again, as you know, I've got two key senior admins out on leave right now that I've got to work through that. But Mr. McLemore has indicated he may have some more to contribute, so I'd like to bring him forward.
So, Dr. Allen, to your question, as we referenced the five-year work plan. Again, that five-year work plan, it can be amended, and it will be once the district approves the next installment to the five-year capital plan.
And as of today, the state, we're still waiting on the state to open the portal, so I literally could submit it even if we wanted to right now, but it will get amended and that will get corrected. So, and when we look at that five-year capital plan, we're looking ahead and trying to project estimated costs. So again, we were projecting higher than what was a nice surprise or nice actuality of the BAFO coming in under what we projected. Because again, with these high dollar projects, we're going to factor in a little bit higher just to be on the safe side. So we're not coming back to you for a change order or a price increase. So again, that five-year work plan is really more of a financial planning budgetary document, an analysis tool.
So related to this as well, and I know Mr. Sharpless hasn't indicated a question, he may now, but Mr. Sharpless has been asking my office, and more importantly, Ms. Banier, to make sure that while it's not required, we're not obligated to do this, he has requested that we make sure that we submit those plans to the Florida Department of Education to ensure that we are doing, our planning and our design meets all of the requirements so that we are doing it in the best interest of our community members at the lowest possible price, but to get a quality educational environment. And, the benefit we always have with the BAFO, as we've mentioned, is so long as we don't indicate a need for a change, meaning the district doesn't turn around and say, well, this room, we've decided to change the academy that's going to go in there, so we're going to request that this be reconfigured. Instead of a culinary class, we're going to want it to be an auto bay. We would then be on the hook for any re-engineering, redesign, but anything within the scope of work. And so that phase 3, I think that's what we call it, the phase 3 documents, I believe, have been submitted or are scheduled to be submitted. Those will be reviewed, and then that's when they start going back to the value engineering, and the board will get a much better final indicator of where we're landing. But we have the same interest and concern the board has to manage the costs. This was a significant concern when we built Davenport, and the board felt that costs had exceeded the initial projections considerably, so we are committed to making sure that we manage that for our community and for the board.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Yes, sir.
All right. Is that it? Board Member Allen?
That's all I have, Chair.
I recognize Vice Chair Keys.
So along the same items, that being the one we were discussing now, U4 agenda item, I've heard a lot of statements as the conversation has opened up, a lot of which concern me. 2 senior admin out, I've heard the word difficulty. I've heard allowed time. I've heard the conversation of being able to do more. I've heard about still doing value engineering to see what the cost would be at the end. So my immediate concern, and as a question I guess this needs to be addressed to Mr. Green, is if we have an agenda item for a land assignment, if we engage in that land assignment, where does that leave us? More importantly, number two, if we do not engage in the land assignment, is that detrimental to us at that point? Are we under any obligation to execute that land assignment? Is there a timeline we're saying this has to be done at this time because of that? And here's the reason why. Again, I think I just stated, with all of these doubts and questions we have, we're about to engage in a land assignment for a lot of doubts and concerns. And if we're going forward on a process that we're unsure about, I have some reservations about that. So specifically, my question is there a negative effect to us not executing this land assignment tonight?
I'll give you two answers. So where did the timeline come from? And the timeline comes from the interim agreement. So in the interim agreement, one of the terms is that Fortress shall assign the land to the board. And the time frame that was put in was within 180 days of the execution date of the interim. Executed in April, 180 days was October. So we're in the window now to assume that assignment or to follow through that assignment of the land. The other answer to the question is, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to build the school. We're trying to open it in August of 2028. In order to open a school by that time period, the facilities folks say we need to break ground in the spring. March, May is our window there. So we're in January. The land assignment is teed up, so we can take the land. And the breaking ground needs to happen shortly after the design phase is done and we work on our comprehensive agreement. So I hope that answers the question. It's part of one of the steps that needs to happen prior to breaking ground and a school getting built.
So no, because, and then I should have phrased the question more, I guess, directly. Being one who is involved in real estate contracts frequently, I guess, is there are any punitive damages to the district for not engaging in the land assignment in a situation where we still have a lot of questions?
No, there's no penalty right now if it's not executed tonight. We're losing time, but to the extent that there's questions that remain, we've got Mr. McLemore here to try to answer those questions. I know that a lot of them have come up, and I've worked closely with the facilities folks to try to get you those answers, so you're in a position to make an informed decision tonight. But to the extent that we're not able to answer all of them, then, yeah, there's nothing punitive, to use your words, that if it doesn't happen tonight or today, there's some penalty to the board.
Okay, so that does answer my question, and here's again, to go back to my original statement. I've heard 2 senior admin out. I've heard there's difficulty in. I've heard that we have to allow time was mentioned, doing more. And if there's any uncertainty, we have 2 responsibilities as a school board, policy and we're fiduciary. We have a fiscal responsibility too. So if we're engaging in a project and of the amounts that we've said that 205 was an estimate projected, but we had a BAFO, I believe it was a 182 was the number I heard, or 187. I'm unsure on that. But to engage in a process where we have an assignment that's going to take place on a project we still have questions about, if there's no punitive damage to us. Now I realize that we're losing time, right? In my mind, and we can have, argue semantics all day long about it, but the meeting I was sitting in, the original projection we were talking about from an attendance boundaries was possibly in August of 26. We hadn't even had the conversation yet, but now we're in August 28. Furthermore, to support that narrative, we think about the neighboring county of Osceola County. How many, students have we lost of enrollment because there wasn't availability or are maxed out that have gone over to Osceola County. Real concerns, FTE dollars, maybe, I've heard estimates of somewhere near 1,000 students potentially. Those are big concerns, the district losing out on it. But again, at a cost of $180+ million, in my mind, although we can argue that, if we're, in my mind, 2 years behind, I don't mind if we're a couple more months behind if we know we're making a sound decision on stuff that we still have questions on. And a lot of mine, and that being in regards, go around to, since we've already opened Pandora's box, we've got 4 appraisals, one at $12.5 million, one at $5 million, one at $7.6 million, one at $11.25. On those same appraisals, every single appraisal say that somewhere around 65% are in special flood zone area A. Flood zone area is a flood zone area. So there's some definitions we need to look at. To the east of that area is an area called London Island. The definition of an island is an area of dry, relatively dry land surrounded by water, okay? To the west of that is the area called Indian Head Swamp. A swamp is poorly drained wetland, fresh or salt water, wooded or grassy, possible covered with water. In every single appraisal, it states that at least 65% of this land is covered in flood zone A. Flood zone A. So if we all get the development that's happened in that area, those that are not in a flood zone have houses on them. All of them have houses on them. So then I start thinking to myself, if that has happened, why hasn't development occurred in that area over the course of the past 20 years where all those houses are? Probably because it's undesirable land and it's in a flood zone. So if we haven't made that process yet, we haven't gone there yet, I have real reservations about laying my head on the pillow at night, signing off, not actually signing off, but voting on something that we're still unsure about. And those questions I don't think we've heard, and people have, there's represented that this is not an issue. If you look on the search today on FEMA's flood map service, it is still in special flood zone A, right? There are 2 creeks in the area that flow south into the area where that property is, right? So again, I know that we're kind of halting a process here, but until at least I feel comfortable with it, or not me, the whole entire board, there's 7 of us, but I can say my stance right now is I've heard so many questions, all words that can be described as doubt on a project. At this point, it's gone too long with that, and I can't be in support of this at all. And I would even say, taking the assignment at this time, I think that we really need all these questions answered with factual data before I feel comfortable about the project at all at this point, or reassessing is there other options that are better in the area.
So my office's position is that we've answered every question. And I'll allow Mr. McLemore to come forward again and address the issue of the flood zone. But I also want to clarify, when I mentioned that I have 2 senior admin staff, that's an impact on me, not an impact on you. And so we will still meet all of our deadlines and deliverables because we will put together a plan to make sure we backfill for those positions. Mr. Fix and others have already taken those steps. Whether it's we have to contract with an architect unrelated to this to help us with our project management, because it's not just, the impact is not this project, it's every project in the district and all of the things that fall under that senior admin. But Mr. McLemore, others have already stepped up. I feel confident in their ability. What I shared earlier was for me to feel comfortable without those 2 senior admins to tell me about what they find, I want to personally be involved in the process. So it takes time, but it's time on top of the things that I'm already trying to manage. So, but that's not an excuse. But I just want to provide that comfort to the board that if we make a commitment on any project, regardless of this one, of any project, the team is going to meet those deadlines. They're going to meet those deliverables, and they're going to do it at a high level. But I'd like to have Mr. McLemore address that, because the floodplain question, I don't believe was sent to me. I don't know, Mr. Green, if you got that, but I thought we've answered every question that's been submitted to date. But I'll let Mr. McLemore address the floodplain issue. Not trying to convince board members. At the end of the day, you have to vote. But I will say, while Mr. Green says there's no penalty, there is going to be a cost penalty if we decide to step away entirely from this project. There are dollars that you've already invested, and we've paid out. So those are things for us to consider, and I'll have to get you a sum of what those dollars would be to date. But I need a little bit of time in between meetings to do that.
And if I may, Superintendent, that being said, now there is no punitive, but we have engaged or may be punitive. And if we don't know, then how can we make an informed decision on our process going forward tonight, specifically on the land assignment? I'm not saying on the project total. Everybody knows me in high school.
Your question was, is there a punitive aspect in the contract? But I'm looking at it where basically I hear some of the concerns, and if the board says, well, we just don't want to engage, so we're starting the timeline over, but there are costs and things that we've expended to date to get to this point. So while there may not be a cost in the contract to walk away, the money that we've spent to date, the staff time and other things, that's lost.
Okay, and of those costs, and I'm not at all suggesting that we're stopping this project in particular, but if the world ended tomorrow and we said, hey, we had a hard stop on this, are those costs associated not being able to transfer to another project? What are those soft costs? Are those, because if there's soft costs in engineering, that can be easily transferred to another project. I'm just saying if we stopped.
The problem we would run into that I perceive, right, just speaking off the cuff here a bit, I would like to do a little bit more research. I think we could transfer some of our costs if this were a traditional design and build. But because we decided to go the P3 route and engage with Fortress, and then they in turn have hired all their subs, we're not hiring them. That's my concern, is what money's been expended to date. Not that that should justify a decision to move forward if you're uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, I don't want you to have the belief that there's no money lost in this project, because there may be. And so, like I said, give me the time between meetings, and I'll get with staff and see what money has been expended, and be able to provide that update to you this evening.
That being said, and this is me and my unfamiliarity with that, would that be, I know the response I'm going to get on that. Do we need to postpone the land assignment until we get those answers?
If I can get them for you before this evening. I think we've kicked this can down the road for a while with this topic. But I'd like to let Mr. McLemore address the issue of the floodplain.
So, Board Member Keats, to your point about floodplain and flood zone A's, to be clear, not to go too far in deep with how FEMA assigns flood zone A's, when FEMA assigns an area to be flood zone A, they have a couple of ways in which they can do this. Flood zone A is just an area that has shown signs that it could potentially be in a flood zone. You have another category called flood zone AE. AE means that a study has actually been done and has definitively determined the base flood elevation, that minimum elevation in which a flood water would actually impact your gross developable acreage. Now, much of Poinciana, before that whole development area was even done, you can go back and see historical FEMA floodplain panels, much like what Mr. Keys, you referenced. And if you go on FEMA's website today, you can see there's this thing called Flood Zone A. Well, much of before Poinciana was ever developed, that was all Flood Zone A. It took development to do due diligence, hydrosoils analysis, and then submit something what is called a letter of map revision, or a LOMAR, to FEMA via the county to actually definitively show, yes, we understand, FEMA, you initially labeled this as a flood zone A. However, we have additional due diligence and reports that say this is actually an error, and those areas can be adjusted. That actually happens more frequently than not.
So have we done our due diligence to show that that is not the case? Because other than that, also, one of those appraisals said 30 acres were in flood zone X, right? And of those studies, it says that there's a 26% chance over the course of 30 years that they would experience that. Again, I want to make sure we're doing the best with what we've got. And if we can get questions answered, I've said it since I came on the board, I believe in November, this train had already started rolling in that direction. But I think that was my statement because, and I don't want to speak for everybody else, but this is 5 miles from where I live. I've hunted barefoot in that land for years. It's a swamp.
To answer your point, in working with our partners with Fortress and Jason Rod Construction, their subs that they have enlisted, they will be conducting those. They will conduct the formal documents to issue that LOMAR request to FEMA to get this remapped, because they've already done some of the due diligence for that. Some of that comes from soil borings. They've done extensive soil borings on the site itself, so they can already definitively determine where is that base water level at when you start drilling into the ground. So some of their findings already came back that yes, there's actually, this is not as wet as you think it is. And some of those areas that were labeled as a wetland area, those soil borings and their analysis came back saying, actually, this is not a true wetland. This is actually old vegetative growth that was piled here from who knows how long. So there is some due diligence that we already have. There is some additional work that has to be done to go up to FEMA to get that flood zone A amended. So there is work still ongoing.
Okay. That's all the statements I had.
Thank you, Board Member Keys. Board Member Miller, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and bringing us more information. I'm not sure why we're just not going to vote this up or down. This has been going on for November. When we say we've had a lot of questions, my questions were answered probably late November, early December. I understand flood zones. Everywhere in Florida is a flood zone. There is a 1% chance in a zone A that within that year there will be a flood of some kind. This is not new to us. This process is not new to us. I think we can't have it both ways, to where we don't support building portable cities, but we take this long to make a decision. We have to make hard decisions. Sometimes they're very difficult. So I'm asking the board to make a decision and stop kicking this can down the road, because it's just becoming a long drawn process that never should have been. I can tell you that back when we talked about this, it was 4 years ago when Ms. Usher was here. I don't want the public to think that's something that we have done consistently, where we have voted on something. I was surprised to find out that the purchase was not made back then, but I also know that what the market looks like, and you can have a price for something today, and within 30 days it'll look very differently. So once we had discovered that my first question was, when we discovered that the purchase was not made at that time, was, is there anything else we voted on that hasn't been? And I think that's a communication piece with facilities. I think the communication piece with changing the 5-year plan with facilities has helped, talking about how we'll get information, how will we be alerted to things like that. But as far as mulling this conversation over with the same questions that you've answered at least twice publicly, I think that we need to have a vote on this tonight, and the words need to be, I have questions and not we have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Miller. Now recognize Board Member Allen.
I appreciate the conversation, and I think communication is critical. I think the surprise to me was the fact that the Kankakee property was not disclosed to us, that it was actually a part of the Fortress deal. And, when that surprise is unveiled, there are those seeds of doubt. Here we vote on it. It's not purchased. We move forward with Fortress because the secondary removes their contract, but it wasn't noted on record that the property that was a part of Fortress and that deal was the property that we had previously voted on. So I think the surprise and the communication is what's stimulating that doubt for me in particular. But, I want to come back to a phone call conversation I had with Mr. Green this morning. I think it is important for me as well. And if you could allude to it, we were, talking about the process where we are with the comprehensive plan, right? So, and that's going to give us a sense of knowing what the gross maximum price is, right? And that's important, I think, too, the surprise, too, if I want to go back to that, as Ms. Miller was noting, I think it was a surprise that the land assignment was coming back to the district comparative to, say, the Scenic Terrace project. That land that's a part of that is not assigned to the district. So it's different, and I'm accepting different because I do think some P3 projects go this way. So I'm just wanting to understand more as well. So why the land assignment has to come back to the district rather than being underneath the umbrella of the Fortress, purchase. But I think what stuck out to me from Mr. Green in our conversation this morning was with the comprehensive, solidifying, we can still pull back from the project. Is that my understanding how that played out in our conversation this morning, because what I don't want us to do is we go into this, we get to the comprehensive plan, and it's like way more expensive than what we expected in regards to our BAFO at 182. So I'm just wanting to make sure that there's outs as well. And so when I heard that, I'm like, okay, that gives me a little bit more confidence in the process. But again, I'm still unresolved at this point. But
I'll try to address both your questions. The first one had to do with why is the district getting the land assigned to it? And that's just the nature of the agreement that we sign in this particular case. That was how it was structured versus Scenic Terrace, which was a different deal on different property. As to part two, it really kind of fits in, again, the timeline that I created, which is where we are now, where we want to be. And that was, I created it for myself to know what steps were next. So again, if you take the big ticket item, we want to try to open a school in August of '28. We have to break ground in the spring of this year. So where are we now? We're in January, late January. And the next steps are, one of the steps is we have the assignment that's ready to go, if the board wishes to proceed with that this evening. Either way, they have the design phase, phase 3, which will get us to about the 90% percentage point of where we are with almost being complete with the design. Once the design is done, then we have plans, and all we have left to do is break ground. So the step that is called for in the interim agreement is it's right around this time period. We're all coming to a head on timing. Once the design is complete, the parties, Fortress and the board, will negotiate the comprehensive agreement. And at that point, we've already kind of been in negotiations. We've got a draft. We're finalizing some points about what we want to keep in, what we don't. Once we finalize that draft, we'll share it with the Fortress folks, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of really the final price and that sort of thing. So I'm working separately with Brian Williams on that piece, but that's the next step after the design phase, which is Fortress has said that they're going to get us those documents next week, first week of February. Those will go to the facilities department, and they'll look it over and, again, review everything. And at that point, we're ready to go. We're on time, on pace for finalizing the comprehensive. I hope that answers your question. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I mean, I think in that is, if that number, that gross maximum is, outlandishly closer to that, 205 that is being stated that was just an estimate, it's not where we're going to be heading, is there the possibility of not moving forward on breaking ground?
Yeah, I think right now, the number that is in the interim agreement that the board signed in April is the BAFO, the best and final offer. That was my best recollection, $187 million. So that's the figure we all have in mind, and that's the figure that I think facilities is aware of, and they've had several meetings going line by line of, okay, if the auditorium is this square footage, then we're on track, and if we get artificial turf, that might be a little bump, but that's something we request. So they've gone through that, and I believe we're on pace for that, staying within that BAFO price. So again, back to your point, what if it ends up being, way off the charts, closer to that 200 million number that was in the 2024, 2025 work plan? Well, at that point, we're going to come back to the board and say, here's the comprehensive, here's the number that it's actually going to be. It exceeds the BAFO by X plus whatever. You still want to do the deal, and you would have the flexibility to say, no, that's beyond what we anticipated from the interim.
All right. Thanks for that clarification as well.
Got it?
Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Board Member Fields, you're recognized.
Thank you. I agree with the superintendent. We've been kicking this can down the road for a minute. I respect the concerns of the board members. So Superintendent, my question to you is how much of an impact would it have if we were to remove this item from the agenda and bring it back on the 10th of February, since we already are going to be in place for the grievance hearing and work session?
So I'm gonna look to Mr. Green and Mr. McLemore and Mr. Fix because I don't know the specifics of the contractual obligations, so.
Yeah, the 10th isn't a meeting, right? I believe the 24th is the next board meeting.
Board meeting, yes, sir.
That would be when the next opportunity to, if we were to postpone, that would be the next.
We can't have a special call board meeting specifically for that?
Sorry, yes, we could do that. Is that what's, I don't have a calendar in front of me. If that's,
10th.
yeah, potentially then the 10th, yes. I thought that was a work session.
And the reason why I'm saying that is that I respect the questions and the concerns of the board members that have expressed that, but I think whatever, if we're able to have a special call meeting on the 10th and answer all of the concerns and not bring anything new to the table, I think if there's anything that needs to be addressed, it needs to be funneled through the superintendent, and those things should be answered beforehand, and then we need to either vote it up or we need to vote it down. And that's my take.
Thank you, Board Member Fields. Recognize Board Member Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Superintendent, I'll have a question you assign who you think ought to answer. I'm still trying to and grasp the full situation, given that there's a lot of history there, that this was already moving as I joined the board. So I'm slightly insecure about what to do because I'm trying to, incorporate everybody's feedback and be thoughtful, but at the same time just recognize the reality of me being new to the board. So 2 questions, and I'm sorry if they sound really obvious, but for the casual listener who may be watching this, what are the possible sources or reasons for cost overruns, right? Like if we're hoping for 180 something and it were to jump to 2 something, and I'm not talking about, like, Jim, what you mentioned about special order changes that we are asking to make it cost more, but what are all the various reasons that it could go over that we're not able to determine at this time, and what's the chance of those things happening?
Mr. Fix, Mr. McLemore?
And I realize I'm asking a broad question, but, to the best.
As you're asking the question, I was thinking, oh, I hope the superintendent isn't calling me. No. In times past, we would have had some supply chain issues. We would have had some issues with steel and things coming from China. A lot of that has settled down, so I really don't expect, knock on wood, I don't expect some of those to be the issues. If some of those increases come, I expect that there could be maybe slight ones based on, like Mr. Green talked about, like, okay, are we going to, something extra that we've decided we really do want to have. Mm-hmm. One of the other things, and I think the superintendent may have talked about this, the other flip side is when we went through line by line with them, there were some things that we said, oh, no, we don't need that, take it out, and reduce the price too. So it's been a back and forth on that, and we haven't come to the final number on that yet. Mm-hmm. And if I may backtrack a little bit, one of the other reasons, the board, that you might want to consider getting control of the property is because if we own the property, then that is going through our building department review. It's going through our architect. It's going through our own reviews versus if it's going through a local government review instead, which will take a lot longer. School districts have that authority to do that on property that they own. So that's the other advantage of having this property under your control. The other thing is should you decide not to move forward with a P3, but you've purchased a property, you still have that flexibility to come back later and go through our typical process that we've used in the past that we call CM at risk to go ahead and effectuate the building of a high school or whatever you decide to do on that property. So just some feedback on that. I don't know if I've
Well,
answered.
I just didn't know if there was any other possible source of a cost increase that we didn't anticipate. So you mentioned supply chain issues, which I think most folks understand that, but are there any other dynamics that could impact it?
I mean, yeah, there are, but they're like so far out there. So for example,
Right.
you could have to walk away from the property once we break ground. All of a sudden, we realize it's a tribal Indian burial ground. And guess what? We're done. So I think there are a lot of outliers like that, but the only real reasons that we should see anything cost overruns would be district-directed changes to the plans, the schemes. We decide to relocate a building. We decide, we've talked about it. Let me use a better example. We've talked about an employee clinic and looking for a new location. What if we decide, well, we've got the property, we've got the space, let's go ahead and add the employee clinic there. So those are obvious, right? But that wouldn't be on them because that's a change in the original scope of the plan and design. If we decided, Ms. Wallace or board members, that we want to change the quality of an interior product, tile, paint, different FF&E.
Or increase the capacity.
Correct. Those would be issues that we would typically incur costs. Now, most of the changes, and because we're piggybacking off of another design, most of those things that we believe would have required a change, they're already aware of, and we've already started to identify those prior to all of this so that we could start in a much better position we were previously. So I think those are the biggest areas, because as Mr. Fix pointed out, unfortunately, in 2021, 22, we were dealing not only with material shortages, but we were dealing with factories not being able to meet demand. South Point, for example, we opened right on the first day of school, and it wasn't really ready for staff. We had to actually relocate staff when they returned because the contractor could not procure air conditioning units in time, and so they had to bring in one on a trailer to power the school. There were a lot of things like that, materials delays, but then labor delays were our biggest concerns as well. What we learned a lot from, and there is a slight difference between the two properties, as Dr. Allen pointed out, between what we did with building tomorrow schools and what we're doing here, and the reasoning for, owning the land versus in that position, I don't think that came up, number one, and number two, because it's a lease, we didn't want to find ourselves in a position that if we walked away from that facility before we owned it, that now we're the landowner, but now we've got somebody who's built on there. There's a lot of conflict that could arise as a result of that. So I think I've given you as many examples as I can. There are some unknowns, but thankfully we would be protected and isolated from a number of those.
Great, thank you. And then I guess between what we're hoping for and intending to have and when we would know the final number, right, that would be pretty immediately relative to 2028.
That is correct. Just as Mr. Green said, we're getting close to that 90%, and then we'll be able to come up with that dollar figure. So we're very close to, in time frame, to knowing that.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I have another question for Member Keys. Okay. Just as this is your district, you know the area. I actually don't know that area of the county the way I know other areas of the county. Just all your misgivings aside, how is the practicality of the location? Like, if a casual bystander was walking by and said, hey, they're going to build a school right here, what do you feel like as a local, how the community would respond to that?
I think if you're directing that question, there's no technicality behind it. But my feeling on it, and I stated, I think from the original, it's not the most favorable side at all. I think that when we've looked at and just recently made aware where there was a statement made about another piece of land we were considering, that there's nothing else out there. And lo and behold, we were approached by, folks from municipality that had land available for potentially use in other sites. So saying there's not other land out there is an argument was given. But back to your original statement, I think there there are better sites still available for this, and it is probably one of the, I think, least favorable areas and location that I can consider living out there and lived out there for quite some time for the location of a high school, based on its general location, availability, access to the road, what's already there. I think it's not the most favorable site for a high school. Whether or not it's the issues I've discussed, as flood issues, it's not a good area.
Okay, thanks.
Board Member Wallace, are you?
Oh, that's it, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Wyatt, I recognize you.
Thank you. My comments are similar to Ms. Millard's and Ms. Fields in that we've been talking about this for a really long time. And I would like to see it on the agenda to vote tonight, but if there's not a consensus to bring it forward tonight, I'm okay with moving it to the first week in February. But I think we need to either vote it up or down and move on, because we're going to just keep talking in circles. Yes.
Thank you, Board Member Wyatt. Attorney Green, you're recognized.
Thanks. I wanted to just highlight a few clauses from the interim agreement. It's the current agreement we're all operating under. This will kind of bring everything into focus, I think, as far as where we are and what we're trying to still accomplish. So in section 2H, like hotel, the clause reads, developer shall assign to the school district the contract for the purchase of the property. The parties will make their best efforts to complete the assignment within 180 days of the effective date. So again, that was October is when that sort of became timely. We're now about 3 months after that, so we're in the window. The next important clause is really kind of where we are as we speak. I think as of next week. So with the submittal of 90% plans, and I think we're at like 89% right now, the developer, that's Fortress, shall provide an actual budget for the project based on a stipulated sum for delivery of the completed project to school board and project timeline. So when that happens in early February, again, those plans will go to the facilities department. Upon the school board's acceptance of the 90% plans and project budget, the school board and the developer will, in good faith, negotiate the terms and conditions of the comprehensive agreement. So it kind of goes back to what's that next step? Where are we in the process? And it says, except as otherwise provided in this agreement, the interim, any other change to the 90% plans that increases the project budget for the project shall be the responsibility of the developer. In the event the comprehensive agreement is not complete and approved by the school board within 90 calendar days from the approval of the project budget, the school board and developer will reevaluate and revise the project budget to reflect market changes, if any, in material, labor, or other project costs. So I think that's kind of the window we're in right now. It's a lengthy interim agreement, but I wanted to just focus in on that specific paragraph because that kind of defines where we are right now and what the next steps are. All right.
Thank you, Board Attorney Green. I'll go ahead and put my thoughts in. As far as whether this should be voted up or down tonight, I certainly appreciate listening to all my board members on this board. We have diverse opinions. There are certain things about this that I just don't particularly care for. I don't like the fact that the land has to be purchased by us. I don't like that part of the P3. I'd much rather have the P3 that we don't have to purchase land. It's just part of the package in a BAFO. I also, as someone who's been out there frequently, going down to Fire Tower Road at the former FFA Leadership Training Center, I know that area out there can get wet at times. However, we did have a member of Fortress here state that it is not on the floodplain. So it gives me some, I'm going to say this, it gives me some confidence that that's the case. And if we were presented inaccurate information, let's say it turns out to be that, Do we have any legal recourse for that?
I guess it depends on what the inaccurate information is.
Okay.
Is it,
Only, 'cause I asked this very specific question last time, and I was told that it was not in the floodplain. And I just want to make sure, because I don't want to buy land that's going to
Sure.
be flooded out.
Sure.
And so if that is in fact, which I'm not claiming it is, but if it does come to fruition that that is not the case, then would we have legal recourse against Fortress for providing us false information? That's my question. And I'm not saying that's the case.
I mean, to the extent there was some, fraudulent document submitted,
Okay.
yes, but if the surveys are being done in good faith and there's some, biblical flood or something like that, that's unforeseeable, that's an act of God what are you going to do?
Gotcha.
And, these things happen from time to time, and look around the country and the floods that happen. But in terms of what due diligence is being conducted right now, I think Fortress they've all but completed it. They've shared those documents with us. I think they're in our possession now fully, and we're reviewing them, and so I think
And with that, I also appreciate the superintendent's reassurance about submitting those plans to the state. That's just something that I'm very passionate about, because I want to make sure that we're giving the best ROI for our taxpayers in this county. If we're spending the money, we got to be doing it efficiently. And so I appreciate that commitment to making sure that we're doing this through the smart, using smart design. Having said all that, we have been talking about this for a long time. We've been talking about it for a long time today. For me, we needed to have this built years ago, and so delaying it anymore, I'm not certain that I am in favor of that, just because I would like to see this move forward. So I don't have an issue with voting it up or down tonight. Personally, that's just, again, every other board member has stated that they, their feelings on it. I have heartburn on it, but I have even more heartburn not building a school that's needed. So that's the practicality of it. I know, that's just my 2 cents. Having said that, is there any more discussion on our action agenda? Seeing none? What? Okay, sure. Oh, wait, one second. All right, you're recognized, Board Member Fields.
Thank you. I just want to make sure everything is clear here, so we're going to leave it on the agenda to vote for tonight. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Fields. Is there any discussion or questions on item V, our public hearing? Seeing none. Superintendent, do you have a report for us tonight at our board meeting?
I will at the board meeting, sir.
All right, thank you. Next, Mr. Green, it looks like you have something for us on our attorney's report tonight at our board meeting?
yes, I'll be presenting that later.
All right, thank you. Then after that, we will wrap up with our personal comments, and then, of course, public comment at our board meeting tonight. Are there any other questions at all on the agenda for the board meeting tonight? Nope, seeing none, we can go back to our work session. So if we can, everyone transition back in board docs to our work session.
New business.
We are in our new business. Superintendent, would you like to address G1 and G2, the name changes?
Certainly. Mr. Chair, members of the board, so we have a naming convention and we have a procedure and policy for naming new schools and those types of things, or renaming or naming a facility within a school. That has to be done through the School Advisory Council. But in this situation, the traditional naming conventions do not apply. These schools are being renamed because the students that they serve was changed. So referring to Belisita as Belisita Elementary when it's a K-8 school no longer applies. Referring to Alta Vista, which has now been converted to a K-8 as an elementary school, no longer applies. So those are the two new business items on there for the board Just wanted to make sure I provided an explanation as to why it didn't go through a traditional naming process where we would reconvene. And that's intended, if we were going to change the name from an existing name or a non-existent name to something the community and students and others give us input on. You've been through that process with the exception of Ms. Wallace, but you'll get an opportunity in the near future. But this is just, again, renaming the school to include K-8 instead of just elementary in both cases.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions for the superintendent on those items? No? Okay, now we're going to go to G3. This is an item that I asked to add on to our new business, a discussion on the Northeast Polk growth. So this is multiple times now. I mean, we just talked about it for a while today. Plus, there's multiple properties we've been talking about. I know when my time on the attendance boundary committee, we've always talked about how much the Northeast is growing. And I think everyone in Polk County, if you've driven, just last week, and I went to Tallahassee, I drove north from my home in South Lake Wales to I-4 and all the way up. And I can tell you it's a lot of congestion in Northeast Polk. And I think everyone can understand that because of the growth. And so what I would like to see, and I'm just one board member, so why I'm bringing it forward to the board for discussion, I would like to have a presentation. I went and I talked to, because okay, let me go back. In a previous work session or retreat, I can't remember what, was that a retreat? Okay. At one of our board retreats, Superintendent Hyde mentioned that he had talked to some individuals about the growth in the Northeast. And so I went and talked to them as well, right? I wanted to understand it better because I want to be the best board member I can be. And so, having a conversation with them, I felt like that's something the board needs to hear about. What is the projected growth? Where is the areas, right? All that kind of stuff. So we can be, again, we're just talking about a new high school now, but there's going to be more new schools that have to be built up there, right? And so I would like to bring in those individuals for just a work session agenda item to discuss the growth in Northeast Polk County. And so I wanted to see if my fellow board members were interested in entertaining that kind of presentation to our board. And with that, Board Member Miller, you are recognized.
Thanks, Chair Sharpless. I think it's important that we have that information. I don't know who the individuals are. In the past, we've heard from county officials, and I think as long as it's working with the relationships that we have to make sure that we're hearing for the people that are at the forefront of that, whether you bring in the county to do a dual session with the Polk's Economic Development Council, whether you bring in the county that talks, the people over the land there and zoning, it would be great to see what they do. I'm not sure who the individuals, but I think it's great that you're having the conversation. I'm not sure who you're requesting.
Okay. Well, I can tell you the group that I talked to is the Cassidy Group. They're a large developer in that area because I wanted to know boots on the ground. But I certainly, am open to having the county come in and to have a discussion. I just want to understand it better, and because I just want to make sure I'm making the best decisions. And so they are. That's just. I just wanted to bring it forward so we could see if that was an appetite of the board.
I appreciate you bringing it forward. I think the only thing that'll happen, or feedback would come from the community, is if we allow one group or one developer, then we would have to do multiple developers. And I'm not sure that we have time for that. But I do think having the county come in, who works a lot with Cassidy as well as others, that they may be able to give a broad perspective of what's happening. Not only I think the Northeast area is obviously the biggest growth, but maybe a quick review of what, how the census showed the movement that direction and what they're planning to do even with infrastructure and roadways. So I think it would be a great topic. I would just be cautious of the time we allot to one group and not another, because we'll then get the requests from multiple, I'm sure.
Yes, Superintendent.
And I know you have other board members, and I'm not trying to jump the line, but I am. But I want to clarify, though. Because in the retreat, while Ms. Miller is correct, we work directly with the county. And our team meets with them monthly. They work through these things. The reason there was a recommendation to talk to someone who may have more information is certain individuals know where properties exist and they're anticipating development that hasn't yet been disclosed to the county. But I think to Ms. Miller's point, we need to bring in a group to have a conversation. My strong suggestion would be we do that in a workshop or a board retreat, because then it does not, the concern is obviously that we don't want to give the impression that a developer or a group is driving a board decision in the future about where to put schools. But I do think you need to be aware, and that's why I initially brought it to the board as a consideration, but I'd like to bring the county in as well, because they are our formal partners. We have repeatedly asked for our annual interlocal agreement meeting. I reached out again recently and asked for it, and they're working towards trying to secure a date and a time, because we haven't had one in 3 years, and it's definitely time for us to reconvene and make sure that you're hearing from them, we're hearing, and then I think it's really important to bring in those people who are in the know or have their ear to the ground as to where other potential developments are going to be. And I think that's, well, I can't say I think, I know that's why I recommended it in the first place. So I just wanted to provide some clarification because Ms. Wallace was not privy to that conversation previously.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board Member Miller, are you?
Thank you, I'm finished, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Board Member Miller. I recognize Board Member Keys.
So I was just going to echo what Mrs. Miller said and Superintendent Hyde, that, you know, I was also going to say I think we bring in multiple viewpoints of that. And I think probably we needed, the county is wonderful, possible developers who are prominent in the area, but also consider municipalities, city of Davenport, city of Haines City. If we're talking about the Northeast, those are the two high volume growth areas, is Haines City and Davenport, and maybe having them, not necessarily present, but there to be able to provide input should we have questions. Because as we have questions arise, something may be more, to them being in city limits, because a lot of these potential growth, Power Line Road area, that's within city limits of Haines City, that they may be able to provide some insight that perhaps the county doesn't have.
Thank you, Board Member Keys. Board Member Fields, you are now recognized.
Thank you. I just was going to say what Superintendent Hyde said about we've been trying to have a concurrency meeting for a long, long time. And I think we just need to stress the urgency of the meeting, and it needs to be countywide and have everyone to the table, with the county being the main presenter, I would think, as it has been in the past.
Thank you, Board Member Fields. Board Member Wyatt, you are now recognized.
Thank you. And I'm looking at Josh. I'm not asking him any questions, but I'm looking at him because their department shared a really great tool as we are getting ready to go through the high school rezoning process that shows where all of the growth that we know about. And I don't know if you all have had a chance to delve into it. I don't know if it's been shared with Ms. Wallace, but could we have that? I'm directing this at you, Superintendent Hyde. Could we have them reshare that with us? Because I think that's a really helpful tool to Superintendent Hyde's point. While we don't necessarily know where growth is coming, as far as meeting with the developers, is that something that they would be willing to share in a public meeting, or would it be better for our staff to meet with a smaller group of developers?
I think that
I just feel like if I have a industry secret, I'm not going to go on into a public meeting and say it out loud.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to ask them to disclose what their immediate plans may be, because they're finalizing contracts, they're doing those things. But I think they have a better view of the landscape, the potential impact. And if we ask them to present it from that perspective, I think that would be fairly significant for the board to take into consideration, because all along, I think the concern is and I'm going to say disconnect, but it's not the right word. I'm apparently struggling for words today. The county only knows what the county knows, with what's been submitted, what's being approved, and I think we're seeing more and more contentious meetings happening So now the developers may be a little bit more reluctant to keep rolling forward with projects, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be paying attention to potential impact and as we make decisions. So as far as your question about a public meeting, it probably would make more sense, again, to do it at a retreat or to do it at a workshop. But we can work with them, and based off their willingness, to say, we're not asking you to disclose anything specific, but what do you see? What's on the horizon? What's out there? How many properties out there are currently even being anticipated for home sites, and what type of home sites? I think that does give us a little bit more insight and information that we may not otherwise get through our conversations with the county or municipalities. But we want to talk with them and make sure they feel comfortable sharing and give them the context that we're not asking them to say, you know, in the next 18 months, give us a list of all your development plans. I don't think they're going to disclose that, but.
Well, I don't, and that's why I say I don't, I would be interested in hearing from them and their comfort level of, is it something that you would rather do a roundtable with our planning and facility staff and some of your senior admin, or is it something that they want to do with the full board?
I think Mr. Sharpless has had an initial conversation with them. He asked to bring this forward. I asked him if we could put it under new business for this sole purpose of the board to have some discussion. I think you benefit more from having a conversation with you directly. And then if we have anything, if we want to meet with them prior to the meeting, to just kind of clarify what's going to be shared, what can be disclosed, what shouldn't be disclosed, happy to do that. And I just think we're just looking for some direction from the collective board as to what do you believe, what would you like next steps to be?
Thank you. I would just ask that that we open it up to any of the developers in that area that are interested and willing to participate.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to be very clear. It's not my goal to give any single developer any kind of preferential treatment. That's just the one I got to meet with because that's the one I had more of a relationship with. I would be very, very open to having as many that come in as possible. I just want to learn. I want to be able to make better decisions. And I think potentially having, Board Member Keys talking about some municipalities up there. I think that could certainly add, and the county certainly could add a more robust look at it. So Superintendent Hyde, I think you've gotten enough direction from here saying that we want to have something, right? And that, with your being able to put it on a future workshop, I think.
Let me work up a potential agenda,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. I'll share it with you and Mr. Green, and then share it with the board because I have a feeling to have a meaningful dialogue, we're going to have to do it over a few meetings. Whereas a retreat does give us a little bit more flexibility, and we could host a retreat here for the convenience of the community. But let me see what information I can gather and plan for, and then make sure that the topics that I fishbone out in the agenda are the ones that you're most interested in as a group. Once I get that feedback, then we can determine one meeting, 2 meetings, or can we get it done in one singular workshop? I think that's the important part. So I clearly have received feedback that, yes, it's an interest of the collective board.
Well, and I would just, one more thing to add from my perspective. I think this is a conversation that should be had sooner rather than later. So if we can prioritize this, I would appreciate it. I'm getting nervous on how much growth's happening just for me driving there. And so I appreciate that. Thank you, Superintendent.
Yes, sir.
Board members, I'm going to ask if, a point of privilege, if Board Member Wyatt could possibly give her item for board update before G4, and then we can get into the G4 item, okay? So Board Member Wyatt, sorry. You have another question? I didn't see that. Board Member Wallace, you're recognized.
All right, really quick, I just wanted to say, as someone who was born and raised in Bartow, I have geographic bias to the west side of the county. My understanding, in terms of my knowledge base, my understanding is the east side of the county has transformed over the last 30 years by percentage more than any other part of the county. So I totally support educating us, and given that our office is here in Bartow, probably the furthest away point other than Bradley Junction, I just wanted to say I support that and appreciate any efforts to bring us up to speed on an area that probably has transformed more than any other in the county, relatively speaking, correct? Okay, thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Board Member Wallace. I'm sorry I did not see.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry to hold up.
No, it's all good. So Board Member Wyatt, you are now recognized.
Thank you so much, and I apologize because I'm going to have to step away for just a few moments. But I spoke with Mr. Green over the weekend about the travel policy that went out, partially because I'm trying to understand how did we get so far from the state statute. It sounds like when we updated ours in 2019 that we updated it to become more restrictive than the state statute. So it currently, as state statute, if it's over $500, so if we're going to a conference, we have to notice that and get board approval. The way that we have written it into our policy, if we are leaving the county, we have to get board approval. So for things like if we're going to do a site visit of BizTown, if we're going to a CF, Central Florida School Board Association meeting in Orlando, for some of us that live closer to one county line than the other, it's quicker for me to get to Osceola County than it is for me to get to Frostproof. So it seems a little silly that for a meeting at the county line that we would have to notice it. That's not in state statute. So I had asked Mr. Green to look at revising that, but I wanted to make the full board aware and make sure there were no other comments or concerns about that as his team is looking into that. Okay. I appreciate it. That was the only thing that I had for today, but wanted to make sure I got it out before I had to step away. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Wyatt. Now we're going to go to G4, Board Member P cards, and I would like to recognize Superintendent Hyde for that discussion.
So, board members, there have been requests from a handful of you as it relates to being issued P cards. And I know that the interim counsel had given some advice previously. I will tell you that Mr. Green and I have spoken about it. I can give him more time to do more research if you like, but there is nothing in statute or rule that prohibits a board member from having a P card. The only thing that does stipulate, though, is that should you accept the responsibility of a P card, you must go through the annual training and you must comply with all the requirements for receipts and those types of things, as you do now already for your existing travel. Some of you find great flexibility with being issued a P card. Some of you have basically found yourselves stuck. And you need to extend, you need to do those things, and so there's a benefit potentially to you having those. So just wanted to put it out there because I was a request of the board members to bring this topic back up. It's not an all or none. If none of you decide to take a P card, there's really not a vote. It's an option I want to make sure all the board members were aware of. If you'd like to be issued a P card, we'll have to schedule that, schedule the training, and then make sure that you're in compliance each year with the training requirements. Outside of that, you are not obligated to receive a P card. So that was the item, that was the request, so I just want to make sure, and I'll look to Mr. Green unless if there's anything that conflicts with that or contradicts what I've shared, but I believe that's the summary of that topic.
You recognize Mr. Green?
Yeah, I recall doing some research on this, and that's a good summary. I can share what I found with you, just so you can see the authorities out there and what the options are for you.
All right, thank you.
Follow up with you.
Any board member questions? All right. Seeing none, we're now to board member comments. These are comments from your committees or anything else that is needing to be discussed right now. Is there any board member comments?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just for one quick moment.
Yes, sir. You're recognized.
Just simply so I can make sure that the media team is aware, following board comments, before we adjourn, we do have a closed session for student discipline, so we will need to clear out the room. But for everybody who's in attendance, there'll be no action to follow. So, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent. Board members, if you have any comments now about any of your committee assignments or anything, seeing none, this work session. Oh, okay. Board Member Miller, you are recognized.
For the delay, Chair. We almost had that done, Shay. I saw you standing up.
I had the gavel in my hand.
Save the dates will go out soon. This is for staff. Probably the superintendent send it too. No, he already knows. But for the board, we will be groundbreaking the Barnett Discovery Center at Tenorock on March 30th at 11 a.m. So I would love for everyone to be there. And you will get a formal invite, but I know calendars go quickly, so I wanted to let you know now. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Miller. Board Member Keys, you're recognized.
Do we get to wear a special hat?
There might be a construction hat just for you.
All right, Board Member Keys, are you done? Okay. Are there any other board member comments? Seeing none, this work session is adjourned.